Chapter 41, Understanding a New World. Eating isn't the only way to grow stronger, Damien said, his tone matter-of-fact as he led Tony Stark along the rocky path. There's another, adaptive evolution. Tony frowned. Adaptive evolution? Right. To trigger it, you have to expose yourself to an environment that's downright hostile to your body. Stay there long enough, and your cells will start mutating to resist the stress. Damien paused, letting the idea sink in. The harsher the environment, the faster, and more dramatic, the adaptation. He'd picked up these tactics over the past few years of survival, and he wasn't worried that Tony might end up stronger than he was. So he laid everything on the table without holding back. Tony considered the concept. Something like a bone-dry desert? Damien shook his head with a small smile. A desert might make you a bit uncomfortable, but it won't push you far enough. If you really want to evolve, think of an environment that actively attacks you. Poisonous fumes, crushing pressure, extreme radiation. That's where your body will be forced to change. Tony's eyes lit up as he absorbed the challenge. All right, he said, voice steady. So where do we start? Damien Ambalaka folded his arms and regarded Tony Stark thoughtfully. Around them, the chamber's walls glowed with holographic schematics of desert dunes and ocean trenches, visual aids Damien had prepared for this briefing. Surviving desert heat isn't enough if you want true, deep evolution, Damien began. Out here, he gestured toward the projected sands, you'll acclimate to the high temperatures. But to unlock real endurance, the kind that lets you harness the desert's power, you must plunge yourself beneath those dunes. Let the yellow sand bury you completely. The immense pressure will trigger profound physiological changes. Tony leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Buried alive? He repeated, as if tasting the words for the first time. Exactly, Damien said. It sounds extreme, but it works. The same principle applies underwater. Sure, you can train to hold your breath at the surface. Eventually, you'll evolve gills or whatever mechanism you develop. But if you want to dive unafraid into the crushing depths, you need to expose your body to that pressure long enough to adapt. Tony ran a hand through his hair. So you're telling me that to really evolve, I have to risk, well, dying? Damien's expression softened. There's risk, yes, but every evolutionary leap carries risk. Surface training will only get you so far. If you're serious about mastering both desert and deep-sea environments, you'll have to commit. Bury yourself in the sand until you can't feel heat or fear. Submerge yourself in the sea until the pressure changes you from the inside out. Tony stared at the swirling holograms, weighing Damien's words. He'd been eager to conquer both domains, heat and depth, but now, faced with the stark reality, his enthusiasm wavered. The price of true evolution felt suddenly, terrifyingly high. Moments later, he exhaled and met Damien's steady gaze. All right, he said, voice low but firm. Let's start with the desert. Damien nodded once. We'll begin tomorrow at first light. Outside the chamber, the hum of the facility carried on, oblivious to the challenge they were about to undertake, and to the transformation it would force upon Tony Stark. It's essentially life-threatening, Tony Stark said, meeting Damien's eyes. When a species undergoes adaptive evolution in an extreme environment, when there's literally no other choice, it can mutate at astonishing speed to improve its odds of survival. Damien listened as Tony continued. Imagine traveling the universe in your own body, dropping into every inhospitable corner of space, uncovering hidden truths, and taking on powerful enemies at the same time. You'd have to prepare for every imaginable scenario, reinforce your physical form, harden your mind just to stay alive. Damien nodded thoughtfully, a corporeal journey through the void. At that moment, Stark, couldn't help but recall the void entities he'd just encountered. Creatures the size of galaxies, radiating an ancient, incomprehensible power. How terrifyingly strong they were. Yet, if Damien ever truly unlocked that level of evolution, galactic travel would be as easy as a stroll through Central Park. Gamma-ray bursts, cosmic radiation, those would be mere nuisances compared to such a being, and every monster that had reached those unfathomable heights would simply be another force under Damien Ambalaka's command. Damien had already evolved to the same level as Harvey Ambalaka, but if he aimed to master one of Ambalaka's ultimate abilities, the time required would be incalculable. Fortunately, Damien wasn't bound by a mere century of life. Given enough years, he was confident he could pierce the veil of the void and claim one of its powers for himself. As the first to venture into the void, Tony Stark felt he needed to advance even further before others followed, both to set the standard and to show latecomers what it truly meant to be a pioneer. "That sounds incredibly exciting," Damien said, his eyes bright with anticipation. A smile spread across Tony's face. There was a time when he only dared dream of leaving Blue Star behind by relying on the genius of his own inventions. He'd believed that, with continued refinements to his powered armor, interstellar travel might someday shift from fantasy to reality. But actually stepping into the universe, feeling the vacuum of space firsthand, had always seemed beyond reach. After all, even setting aside the vastness of the cosmos, human beings still needed breathable air. Now, though, the void offered a path that transcended every barrier Tony had ever known. Damien's tone turned serious. Even without the ozone layer, the ultraviolet alone could kill you instantly. Never mind the cosmic rays, gamma bursts, and every other kind of radiation out there. Tony Stark cracked a half smile. Damien held up a hand. "Don't get too cocky just because you've signed on with the void. That doesn't make you untouchable. There are major players on Blue Star, and if you provoke them, they won't hesitate to eliminate someone as inexperienced as you." Tony's grin widened. "Major players? You mean Captain Marvel?" Damien nodded. "Right now, she's off helping life forms on worlds across the universe. You won't run into her for a while." He paused, letting that sink in. "But the person you should really watch out for is the Supreme Mage, known simply as the Ancient One. She's been Earth's guardian for centuries." Tony leaned back, tapping his chin. "The Ancient One, huh? That's a serious credential." "Exactly," Damien said. "Now that you've joined the Void, I wanted you fully briefed. I even recruited the Sorcerer Supreme myself, to make sure you don't do anything too, well, reckless." Tony's expression turned thoughtful. "Guarding humanity for hundreds of years, I take it she's not someone you want to test." Damien allowed himself a faint smile. Understatement of the century. "That Supreme Mage, the Ancient One, she isn't exactly human, is she?" Tony Stark asked, brows knitting together in confusion. After all, he'd never heard of anyone living past a century and a half, let alone for centuries. Damien Ambalaka shook his head. "Physically, yes, she started out human, but she mastered the arcane arts long ago and found a way to extend her life well beyond normal limits." "So she's been around for hundreds of years?" Tony echoed, unable to hide his disbelief. "Something like that," Damien replied with a faint smile. "But she rarely intervenes in our world unless she has to. As the guardian of the mystical realms, her duties lie in keeping interdimensional threats at bay." Tony ran a hand through his hair. "I always thought magic was just stories." "Joining the Void and meeting you has proved otherwise," Damien said quietly. Tony leaned back, tapping his chin. "Earth alone is crawling with forces most people can't begin to comprehend, and now you've stepped beyond the bounds of Ordina, humanity yourself." Damien's gaze hardened, resolve flickering in his eyes. "Apparently, I have, and I don't plan on turning back." Damien's eyes gleamed with determination as he faced Tony Stark. "Compared to ordinary people, my power may already be beyond common sense," he said. "But beside those who've mastered true superhuman abilities in arcane magic, I'm nothing more than an ant clawing at a boulder." Tony's jaw tightened. He'd spent nearly 40 years living and thinking as a human. Even after crossing into the Void and undergoing transformations beyond mortal comprehension, his mind, his very identity, had stayed human. He drew a steadying breath. "I'm not denying your humanity, Damien. I'm simply pointing out the gulf between raw potential and seasoned mastery." Damien's lips curled in reluctant admiration. "That's self-awareness. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Tony gave a half smile. "Good. You'll need it to resist the temptations that lie ahead." A brief silence fell between them. Then Damien leaned forward. "All right, tell me about the Ancient One. How powerful is she, really?" Tony's eyes softened at the mention of the Supreme Mage. "She's our greatest and oldest mage. Her grasp of the mystic arts rivals the forces that bind the multiverse itself. Time, space, even souls, they all bow to her will." Damien nodded eagerly. "And Peebo? When she joins us, will you explain it to her as well?" "Absolutely," Tony said, tapping a slender finger against his chest plate. Once Peebo arrives, I'll bring her up to speed. Between the two of you, we'll have every angle covered." He paused, studying Damien's earnest expression. "But remember, knowledge is only as valuable as the wisdom you apply when the real trials begin." Damien's jaw set. He'd heard the warning, and he was determined not to squander this chance. "It looks like the full chapter text wasn't included. Could you please paste the entire chapter you'd like me to rewrite?" "Once I have the complete text, I'll revise it into coherent, idiomatic English, renaming Harvey to Damien and ensuring he's clearly a male, while preserving all your plot points and details." Chapter 42, The Authenticity of Gods. Damien watched Tony Stark lean closer to Peebo, eyes shining with eager curiosity. He didn't bother to hide his own excitement. "The Ancient One has mastered countless spells," he began. "She's the Sorcerer Supreme of Blue Star, the most powerful mage this world has ever known." He paused to let that sink in. Her reputation extends across the universe. Few enemies dare challenge Blue Star because of her presence. If I ever got on her bad side, I'd find myself in real trouble. But if you crossed her, you wouldn't stand a chance. Tony exchanged a glance with Peebo. "So be careful," Damien continued. "Don't go wandering off doing whatever you want until you've grown stronger. The Ancient One still intervenes when matters tilt toward catastrophe." Peebo raised an eyebrow. "But I thought she'd found a way to extend her life indefinitely?" "I thought the same," Damien admitted. "But apparently, even her powers have limits. She won't live forever, few years at most." Tony frowned, brow furrowed. "So what happens when she dies? Will everything fall apart?" "Not if we play our cards right," Damien said, leaning back. "Once she's gone, magical energies she holds in check will become available. If you keep growing quietly, avoid drawing her ire or the attention of the other masters, you'll inherit a great deal of power." Peebo looked uneasy. "Are you saying there's an expiration date on her magic?" "Exactly," Damien replied. "She's prolonged her lifespan by centuries, but nothing lasts forever. All the same, she'll be here long enough for us to learn from her, and long enough for you to become formidable yourselves. Just remember, stay under the radar, train hard, and once the Ancient One's reign ends, power will open up to those who've proven themselves." Tony let the words hang in the air, absorbing the weight of what Damien had just revealed. A shadow fell across his features as he considered both the threat and the opportunity, the truth behind the world's greatest sorcerer and the legacy she would leave behind. Damien's voice was grim. "The Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, has protected Earth for centuries. It's her presence that has kept every major cosmic threat at bay. But if she falls, Earth will be helpless against enemies we can't even imagine." Tony Stark closed the blueprint he'd been studying and turned to face him. "You're saying she won't make it past 2017? That once she's gone, some terrible force will finally attack?" Damien nodded. "That's what the projections show." Stark's expression hardened. "Is there no way to save her? To extend her life?" "There is," Damien admitted, eyes downcast. "But it's not an option she'll take. She'll die within the next few years, and I've been ordered not to divulge the reasons." Tony ran a hand through his hair. "So she could live longer, but chooses to let herself die. Why?" Damien met his gaze, his tone flat. "That, I don't know." For a long moment, the only sound in the lab was the hum of holographic displays. Tony stared at Damien, the weight of the coming crisis settling on his shoulders. Finally he spoke, softer this time. "Then we'd better be ready for whatever comes next." Damien Ambalaka watched the shifting currents of arcane power with keen interest. Across from him, Tony Stark studied the Ancient One's aura through a hollow projection of swirling light and shadow. Even after centuries of mastering every forbidden spell, she's still only human, Damien observed. To keep herself alive, she's relying on methods that can't last forever. Tony nodded, eyes dark. "You're right, those life extension rituals stabilize her now, but they're eating away at her essence." Damien frowned. "So there's no easy cure." "There isn't," Tony agreed, "but there is another option." He tapped a control, and the projection shifted to reveal the Void's signature fractured geometry. If she joined the Void, she'd be our greatest asset. Her power would be invaluable, Damien finished. With her strength, she'd tip the balance. Tony shook his head. "I wish it were that simple. In the cycle of the Sorcerer Supreme, the current Guardian must die before a new one can be born. As long as the Ancient One lives, Stephen Strange can't ascend. Silence fell. Damien's mind raced. Recruiting powerful individuals to the Void was how he amassed energy and influence. Each new ally fed the Void's hunger, strengthening him in turn. He couldn't forget the moment Strange awoke to his true potential. It came only after he witnessed the Ancient One's ultimate sacrifice. That final act unleashed Strange's dormant abilities and forged him into the Sorcerer Supreme. And yet, Tony added quietly, Master Gu Yi could use the Void to lay down her burdens and enter the sleep she's earned. Damien met Stark's gaze. The stakes were clear. If the Ancient One refused, Strange would never rise. If she consented, her death would seed the birth of a new guardian and fill the Void with unimaginable power. It was a cruel calculus, but the fates of empires often turned on cruelty. Damien steeled himself for what came next. The Void's promise of limitless power and eternal life seduced countless beings across the cosmos. With just the right temptation, even a scientific genius like Tony Stark or any other power-hungry entity could be turned. But Gu Yi already wields unimaginable power, and her lifespan is no less assured. Those two greatest lures simply won't work on her. And the Ancient One, ever wise, will see the Void for the corrupting force it is. That means the Void must first sway the Ancient One, making her hesitate to oppose it before it can hope to ensnare Gu Yi. To Damien, that tactical shift was deeply unsettling. He regarded the Ancient One and Gu Yi as a twin treasure trove of magical might, untapped, inexhaustible. Yet he had no idea how to exploit it. Wait, Tony Stark interrupted, brow furrowed. If Gu Yi has already ascended as a supreme mage, why do we still expect a major enemy to appear in 2017? Tony tapped his chin, thinking it through. After a moment, his eyes brightened. Of course, no matter how early you inherit such power, it continues to grow over time. That means Gu Yi's current strength still won't be enough in 2017 to stand against the Void's champion. Damien let himself smile. Exactly. I don't know how much I can grow in 8 years. Tony Stark's fists curled at his sides. Hope and worry warred in his gaze. If Damien were guaranteed to help, these doubts wouldn't even surface. Tony knew just how formidable Damien could be. But Damien wasn't from Blue Star. Human moral arguments held no sway over him. No one could predict whether he'd stand with them when the time came. Tony realized that, in the end, he could only rely on himself. I've already told you how my evolution went, Damien said calmly. Where you'll be 8 years from now is something you have to discover for yourself. He gave Tony a level look. 8 years can feel like an eternity, or like nothing at all. Don't burden yourself with too much pressure. When the real enemy arrives, you'll rise to the occasion. It won't be too late. Tony's shoulders sagged slightly as he absorbed Damien's words. They offered comfort, but no promises. At least Damien was confident that the purple sweet potato spirit would never control him, but victory in the battles ahead? That would depend entirely on how far Tony could push his own evolution. Damien folded his arms, meeting Tony Stark's gaze steadily. You asked about the big players in all this. No, it's not just the Ancient One. Tony's eyes flickered with interest. He settled back in his chair. Besides the Ancient One and Captain Marvel, who else should I be worrying about? There's Odin, Damien said quietly. He's the All-Father, ruler of the 9 realms, including Blue Star. His power rivals anything you've ever seen, and he has agents everywhere, keeping tabs on us. Damien leaned forward. So even if you pledge yourself to the Void, lay low. Don't go announcing it from the rooftops. Tony arched an eyebrow. The Void's influence has already changed me. I feel stronger, more open to new possibilities. But Odin, the king of the gods? Does that mean there's a Thor running around too? Or am I dealing with some Olympian Zeus knockoff here? The name startled Tony more than he expected. Damien offered a measured nod. Your understanding is spot on. Odin doesn't tolerate disrespect or unchecked displays of power. Give it time. Patience, as they say, brings rewards. Tony let out a low whistle and ran a hand through his hair. All right, All-Father. Noted. He paused, a wry smile tugging at his lips. You've really thought this through, haven't you? Damien returned the smile, confidence steady in his tone. I've had plenty of time. Now it's your move. Tony Stark stared at Damien in disbelief. You're saying the gods of Blue Star's myths and legends aren't just stories, that they're real, And they all came from the universe itself? Damien nodded crisply. Exactly. Tony ran a hand through his hair, absorbing the revelation. And their power, it's as immense as the old texts claim? Damien's gaze remained steady. Far more terrifying, if you ask me. Tony's expression darkened. Humans see the world through narrow lenses. Our strength, our lifespan, our limited perspective. Of course, we've exaggerated these tales over the centuries. Still, underneath the hyperbole lies truth. Their innate abilities, their mythical artifacts, those details passed down as legend are real. If I hadn't encountered the void, Damien added quietly, I wouldn't have believed any of it was possible. Tony let out a slow breath, eyes distant with awe and something like fear. That's why we label them myths. The people, the deeds, the artifacts, they defy every law we understand. Entire sects and cults worship these beings as gods. He paused, meeting Damien's eyes. You've just turned our entire understanding of reality upside down. For Tony Stark, whose life and career had been built squarely on science, the locals' talk of gods felt naive. If there really were a deity watching over Blue Star, then after countless disasters, both great and small, surely some miracle would have appeared. Yet none ever had. It seemed far more sensible, he thought, to put one's faith in oneself rather than in unseen spirits. He had long considered himself an atheist, convinced that mythologies were simply human inventions, impossible to verify. But now he understood the truth. These so-called gods were not supernatural forces tied to the planet. They were extraterrestrials who had journeyed across the cosmos to Blue Star. Their decision to help humanity depended not on devout worship or ritual, but on their own compassion and willingness to assist. Just then, Jarvis's calm voice chimed in over Tony's comlink. Excuse me, sir. 2 whole ox feasts have been prepared for Mr. Damien Ambalaka. The kitchen is also finalizing several additional dishes to be served later. Shall I have the ox feasts brought in first? Aware that Tony and Damien were in the midst of an important discussion, Jarvis hesitated only a moment before speaking up. Protocol required it. Just send them to the gate. Don't let anyone inside. Tony Stark scanned the cracked wall and the blood-smeared floor, then nodded. Understood, sir? Jarvis, ever mindful that the second-floor restaurant wasn't exactly the most discreet refuge at the moment, didn't ask any questions. Instead, his calm tone slipped in a hint of hunger. Mr. Damien Ambalaka, would you mind sharing a full beef banquet with me? My systems indicate a rather pressing appetite. Tony rubbed his belly, glancing at Damien with an embarrassed grin. He'd only just discovered that sampling different foods could boost his strength, and now that he did, he felt perpetually famished. Damien chuckled. You said you'd treat me to a feast. I won't lose sleep if you skimp on a cow or two. Tony laughed, relief and anticipation mixing in his voice. Thanks, he said, already eyeing the kitchen for the first course. It felt like an eternity since he'd last eaten at 10. If Damien hadn't already gone out for a bite and a few drinks, which would have only stirred up more trouble, he'd probably have driven off to grab burgers or something like that. Thanks for reading. If you enjoyed this chapter, please cast your vote. Chapter 43, I Want You to Promise Me. In no time at all, 2 whole ox banquets arrived at the courtyard gate. Payment had already cleared, so the delivery boys bowed, collected their fees, and hurried off. Tony and Damien each hoisted one of the massive tables, literally heaped with steaming cuts of beef, ribs, and trimmings, and carried them inside. As soon as they were through the door, Tony let it swing shut behind them. He'd braced himself to feel like an oddity in the void, but for now, privacy was all he wanted. Without another word to Damien, he plunged both hands into the mountain of meat and began tearing into it. A single ox could feed a dozen people, but Tony's supernatural appetite reduced it at a visibly astonishing pace. Each bite pulsed with life energy, coursing through his veins and strengthening every cell. Newly arrived in the void, his body was still fragile. Every ounce of nourishment translated into rapid, tangible growth. Less than 15 minutes later, the entire ox lay demolished. Tony leaned back, chest rising and falling, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. He felt invigorated, physically powerful, and mentally buoyant in a way he hadn't for ages. Dark grease and sauce stained the corners of his mouth, but he seemed not to care. Across the table, Damien watched quietly, a smile tugging at his lips. He knew Tony needed this, an almost feral feast to reclaim his strength. Now that he'd fed, Tony would be ready for whatever came next. And Damien? He had a promise to ask. When Tony Stark rose to wash his face, he caught sight of Damien Ambalaka a few meters away, calmly polishing off his meal. The remarkable thing was that not a drop of sauce stained Damien's hands, face, or collar. He ate as swiftly as Tony did, yet looked as if he'd just sat down. "How do you manage to eat that fast without getting messy?" Tony asked, genuinely puzzled. Damien swallowed his last bite and offered a modest smile. "It's just habit." Tony studied himself for a moment, then chuckled and headed for the bathroom. He'd never worried much about dining etiquette. Hosting guests meant as long as he looked presentable, no one minded if he ate with his hands. In fact, many admired his hearty appetite as a sign of character. But standing here, comparing his own grease-smudged shirt to Damien's impeccable appearance, he conceded that maybe he did have some table manners to learn. Tony Stark hadn't bothered to take a photo of himself while eating, but now, in comparison to Damien Ambalaka's exquisitely graceful dining manner, his own was nothing short of barbaric. He chuckled at the thought. If more of his compatriots ever arrived in the void, and he entertained them to a feast, he'd better curb this ravenous style. Otherwise, when the time came to share a proper banquet, he'd look less like a dignified host and more like a starving street urchin. To save everyone else from witnessing that spectacle, Tony resolved to mind his manners going forward. Damien, however, paid no heed. He simply tucked back into his meal with unfettered gusto. Once his companion had satisfied his appetite, Tony slipped into the bathroom to wash his face. Standing before the mirror, he glanced at his reflection. Aside from a newfound sharpness in his vision, he looked almost unchanged. His brown hair, though, seemed richer in color than it had the day before, and there was a faint impression of youth returning to his features. These subtle shifts, he realized, were nothing like the drastic enhancements Damien had applied during their treatments. They were gentle, almost imperceptible improvements, yet improvements nonetheless. Tony Stark could hardly imagine just how powerful Damien Ambalaka had become. Then again, after everything Stark had been through in the void, he knew exactly how ruthless and strong one could grow under those conditions. Damien still had a long road ahead of him, and the greatest danger of all would be letting his own ambitions swallow him whole. Stark splashed cold water on his face, stepped out of the makeshift bat room, and was immediately greeted by wave after wave of fresh dishes. A feast meant for hundreds of guests dwindled to nothing in a matter of hours, as Tony and Damien devoured delicacies with unbridled enthusiasm. "I can't remember the last time I had an appetite like this," Tony confessed, rubbing his stomach and collapsing onto the floor without a shred of modesty. He leaned back against the wall and let out a satisfied sigh. "But I've got to get going. You should talk things over with Pei-Bo." Damien brushed crumbs from his hands and stood up, stretching. "If she's willing, I'm prepared to give her that chance," he said, his voice steady. Tony flashed him a knowing grin. "Good. Don't let her down." With that, he shouldered his gear and headed for the exit, leaving Damien alone amid the lingering aroma of the lavish banquet. Damien stood in the main hall of Stark Manor, facing Tony Stark with calm determination. "Good," he began. "After Obadiah Stane's betrayal, the only two people I can truly trust are Pepper and Jarvis." Tony set down his coffee and raised an eyebrow. Damien continued, voice low but earnest. "Immortality and great power are incredible gifts, but an endless life can be unbearably lonely. I want Pepper at my side for all the years to come, and I'll do whatever it takes to persuade her." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Tony, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for being willing to give Pepper a chance." Tony nodded, pushing back his chair. "Understood. I'll help however I can." Damien allowed himself a brief, grateful smile, then inclined his head and turned away. His visit to Stark Manor had been more than a social call. He had come seeking answers, and he was leaving with a plan. Once he was back home, he'd pore over the hero profile templates to decide which one truly fit him. As the heavy doors closed behind him, Tony called into the quiet hall, "Jarvis, run a full-body scan and compare it to yesterday's data." "Certainly, sir," Jarvis replied. Tony headed down the spiral staircase toward the subterranean lab. Under the soft glow of the overhead lights, he caught his reflection in the glass panels lining the corridor. He smirked, more to himself than anyone else. "All right," he whispered. "Let's see what tomorrow brings." Jarvis's synthetic voice chimed softly in the workshop. "Sir, your current biometrics are equivalent to those of a healthy 28-year-old. No trace of disease or injury. In fact, your cellular regeneration has been markedly enhanced, and the process continues, albeit at a gradual rate." Tony Stark grinned as he leaned against the workbench. "Excellent news, Jarvis. Where's Pepper right now?" "In the apartment upstairs," Jarvis replied. "She's taking a rare day off, playing games on her tablet. I've soundproofed the place so nothing from the lab disturbed her." "Good thinking." Tony tapped his chin. "Can you wake her now and ask her to come down to the underground lab? Just tell her you have something important to discuss." "Of course." Jarvis's tone was polite, almost amused. "Shall I relay it in a manner more persuasive?" Tony laughed. "Let's leave it at straightforward. Thanks, Jarvis." Moments later, Jarvis's gentle chime echoed in Pepper Potts' suite. Pepper looked up from her tablet, blinking in surprise. "Jarvis?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Miss Potts, Mr. Stark requests your presence in the underground research facility. He says it's urgent." Pepper sighed, pausing her game. "All right, I'm on my way." She made her way down the spiral staircase into the lab. Halfway down, she spotted Tony's broad shoulders illuminated by the row of monitors. "Tony?" she called softly. He turned at her voice, a serious look on his face that made her stop in her tracks. Whatever he had to say, she knew it was important. Pepper watched him and couldn't help but notice how rigidly Damien stood, his whole posture bristling with excitement. He took a deep breath, looked her squarely in the eyes, and said in a low, urgent voice, "See, Pepper, there's something I need to tell you, and you have to promise me. No one else must ever know." Pepper's brow furrowed at the seriousness in his tone. Damien rarely looked so grave. She swallowed and managed a nod. He turned fully toward her, his expression unflinching. "I bought it." Pepper's jaw dropped. She stared at him in stunned silence, as if expecting him to burst out laughing, or at least back down. When she found he was utterly sincere, she took a step back, blinking. "You bought it?" she repeated, her voice barely more than a whisper. Damien nodded solemnly, the conviction in his eyes unmistakable. Pepper ran a hand through her hair, processing the unthinkable announcement. All of a sudden, the impossible felt very, very real. Chapter 44. Damien's Revelation. "Damien, what happened to you?" Pepper's voice trembled with equal parts awe and confusion. "You've developed genetic enhancements?" she added, rubbing her eyes as she took a tentative step forward. Damien's appearance had changed so drastically that Pepper could barely believe it. Her heart pounded. If his work truly extended human lifespan without severe side effects, it would be the kind of breakthrough everyone would fight to possess. "Quiet!" Damien snapped. Pepper jumped, her excitement momentarily replaced by shock. She'd never heard him raise his voice like that. "I know you've got 1,000 questions," Damien said, his tone softening, "and I'll answer every one of them. But from this moment on, keep your wild theories to yourself whenever we're around other people. You can think whatever you want inside your own head, just don't let it slip." He dropped his hands from his pockets, clasping them behind his back. His expression was serious, almost solemn. "Agreed?" he asked. Pepper drew a steadying breath. "Agreed." Pepper knew she could indulge her self-centered habits around most people, but not in front of Damien Embalaka. If she acted like that with him, she risked making a terrible impression. So when Tony's low, measured voice reached her ears, she quieted at once. "Is that an order?" she asked, biting back her usual sass. Tony regarded her with cool confidence, every inch the imposing playboy he was. "Not an order, a reminder," he said. He stepped closer, gaze locked on hers. "Listen carefully, because what I'm about to share will open up a whole new world for you. If you stick by my side from now on, you'll be invited to events more exclusive than anything you've ever attended. You'll meet people and see things that defy your wildest expectations." He paused, raising an eyebrow. "At the same time, your impulsive, self-absorbed antics could create problems even I can't clean up. Make no mistake, you'll need to curb them, permanently." Tony closed the final distance between them, his voice dropping. "So tell me, do you accept this proposal?" Pepper's breath caught. She knew she and Tony were beyond mere friendship, but they weren't lovers either, and he was, after all, the world's wealthiest playboy. What she'd say next might change everything. Damien was approaching his 40th birthday, but Pepper didn't need to worry. At least, that's what he'd insisted. She'd been waiting for the day he'd finally calm down and admit there was something odd going on, but she never expected him to respond so straightforwardly. "If you want to believe it, go ahead," Damien said calmly, offering no denial. Pepper blinked, surprised. In the past, he would have brushed her questions aside or claimed she'd misunderstood him. But now he seemed utterly sincere. Damien leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "All right," he prompted. "Talk. I'm listening." Her heart fluttered. She'd been bursting to share this secret for weeks. "You once asked why I suddenly look younger," she began, her voice trembling with excitement. "At the time, I wasn't ready to tell you. I wasn't even sure I wanted to accept the truth myself." She paused, meeting his gaze. "But now I am. I can explain exactly why I've changed, and reveal the hidden world that ordinary people can't even perceive." Damien settled into his chair, eyes narrowing in curiosity. Pepper felt a flicker of nerves but nodded, gathering her notes. With a deep breath, she plunged into the story she'd kept locked away, ready at last to let him in on everything. "I was reborn into youth by someone who opened my eyes to a brand new world. He granted me long life and ever-growing strength. He showed me the true nature of life, the hidden face of reality, the vastness of the cosmos, and the undeniable existence of gods. And the man who guided me into that extraordinary realm was none other than Damien Ambalaka." Pepper sat entranced, hanging on every word. Tony watched her for a moment, then arched an eyebrow. "Pepper, are you seriously buying into this?" he asked, voice laden with skepticism. Pepper blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. Tony offered no further explanation. He understood that mere argument wouldn't convince her. Instead, he leaned back, lifted one booted foot, and brought it down hard on the floor. With a deafening crack, the concrete split and crumbled beneath him. Pepper jumped back, her eyes wide. "Tony, what did you just do?" He eased his foot free, allowing a few shards of debris to tumble away. Pepper knew Tony wasn't weak. His endless hours in the workshop had given him above-average strength. But this, smashing solid concrete with a single stomp, was something else entirely. Silence fell between them as the truth of what they'd just witnessed settled in. In a world of gods and hidden power, everyone's strength could be more than it seemed. This isn't a power Tony, or any human, could channel on their own. It's energy drawn from what we call the void. "Don't worry, I'll walk you through it step by step." Damien shifted his weight, crossing his legs and flexing his ankles to chase away the ache in his soles. He'd expected cracking the concrete slab with his bare feet to be simple, but he'd pushed too hard and actually punched a hole straight through. At first, he winced, then the pain just vanished, as if it had never been there. That was fascinating, but not the priority. Right now, he needed Pepper to understand and believe in the void's power. Jarvis's smooth voice filled the room, exactly on cue. "Sir's physical capabilities have increased manifold, far exceeding those of any ordinary human." Pepper absorbed the words, then looked back at Damien's youthful, earnest face. She still didn't fully grasp what the void really was, but she sensed the moment demanded trust. Without another hesitation, she pulled over a chair and sat down, ready to hear more. "Before you peer into the void, I imagine you'll have some reservations." Tony Stark's voice was calm but earnest as he regarded Pepper Potts. "I know, I was in the same position once. I didn't really grasp what the void was until I faced it head-on." He paused, studying the confusion in her eyes. Then he smiled and switched to simpler terms. "Put plainly, it's a gateway to evolution, adaptation, and survival. It grants you, well, call it a superpower. More importantly, it can extend your lifespan, hundreds of thousands of years if you're willing." Tony reached out and flexed a hand, its skin smooth, unlined. "Since I joined the void, I've grown stronger, younger even." Pepper shifted uncomfortably. Tony gave her a knowing look. "I get it. You're not power-hungry. But tell me, Pepper, wouldn't you like to stay young forever?" Pepper Potts stood in the lab's soft glow, arms folded, as Tony Stark tinkered with a delicate arc reactor. He glanced up, flashing that trademark grin. "I want to stay young forever," he announced. "Let's be honest. Who wouldn't?" Pepper arched an eyebrow. "Sure, But what's the catch? Tony set the reactor down and looked her in the eye. Whenever you gain superpowers or extend your life, there's always a cost. And what is it? She pressed. He folded his arms. Your appetite goes through the roof. You'll need to eat constantly. Pepper's eyes widened. Like Mr. Damien Ambalaka? Tony nodded. Exactly. Think of it as the price of evolution. To grow stronger, you must consume more. The more you consume, the more you evolve, and the longer you live. Pepper frowned. Is that really all? Tony's expression turned serious. The true test is psychological. You'll face temptations you never thought you'd feel. Extraordinary power doesn't just change your body, it rewires your mind. Look at me. Back when I started this whole thing, I held back everything I really thought, afraid I'd look like a fool. He stepped closer, voice softer. But that's different now. For a moment, the hum of the machinery was the only sound. Pepper exhaled and met his gaze. All right, Tony, I'm in. What's our next move? Tony's grin widened as he picked up the arc reactor again. Welcome to the next stage of evolution. Pepper looked at him expectantly. Go ahead, ask. Tony's chest tightened, but he forced a casual tone. If I ate as much as Damien Ambalaka does every day, would I get fat? Pepper raised an eyebrow. That's your question? He'd half expected her to launch into some urgent tech problem or security threat. Instead, she was fixated on his waistline. Well, he hedged, someone with Damien's appetite. She held up a hand. Look, I can't give you a precise number, but judging from Damien's case, despite eating like a growing teenager, he never lets it show. He sticks to a rigorous exercise routine, balances his macronutrients carefully, and his metabolism is naturally high. That's how he stays in shape. Tony considered her answer. So it's doable. Pepper sat forward, her tone shifting from light to serious. There's more I haven't told you, something that goes beyond metabolism or meal plans. But first I need to know this. Will you join me in the void? Think about it. Longer life, boundless exploration on the other side of the world, side by side. Tony Stark's surprise melted into a genuine smile. He reached out his hand. I'm in. Pepper's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm willing, but what should I do? Tony's eyes brightened instantly, his confidence and joy evident in the curve of his smile. First, he said eagerly, we'll go see Damien Ambalaka. He'll tell us exactly how to proceed. Pepper closed her eyes. In the next moment, her body floated horizontally, as though carried by an unseen current. A delicate edge of lace peeked from beneath her skirt, but Tony hardly registered it. His attention was drawn entirely to the ribbon of purple energy that began to coil around her arms and legs, glowing softly in the dim light. He let out a low, reverent breath. The void, it's so vast, so mysterious. Awe laced his voice as he watched the radiance envelop her. To share this journey, this boundless exploration of another realm, with the person he cared for most, felt like the greatest gift he could offer. And yet, even as wonder filled the room, Tony's brow furrowed with mild frustration. A glitch in the system prevented any comments from appearing here, leaving their shared excitement unrecorded in the usual way. Chapter 45, Void Walker. Only a few minutes had passed when Pepper's legs finally gave out beneath her, and she collapsed to the deck with a heavy thud. Oh my God, Tony muttered, leaping to his feet and hurrying to her side. Pepper's eyes fluttered open. Her body trembled so violently she could barely catch her breath. Then with a sudden strangled gasp, she bolted upright and fixed Tony with a wide-eyed stare. Tony, what did you see? He helped her sit up, voice low but urgent. Pepper, are you all right? Tell me, what happened? Her cheeks were ashen, her voice a trembling whisper. I saw behemoths, unimaginable monsters, one after another. I felt so small, smaller than an ant next to them. Tony's brow furrowed. Behemoths? Here? She closed her eyes, taking a steadying breath. They were physical manifestations of the void's will, every one of them born from that black abyss. His eyes widened. So if we embrace the void, Pepper swallowed hard, shaking her head. It means the void can grant you power beyond anything we've ever dreamed of. You, no reason to be afraid. Tony's voice cracked with excitement and fear. Wait, are you saying that I could become one of those colossal creatures? Pepper's face drained of blood. You saw those giants? He nodded slowly, still staring at her in awe and dread. Monsters bigger than planets, endless rows of them. She closed her eyes again, trembling. Yes, that's what I saw. Pepper's voice was calm but firm. Don't worry. Even in this primitive form, it's already the ultimate evolution, and once you learn to channel its power, you can shift into a human shape at will. Tony's eyes flickered as he absorbed her words, his mind racing. Then he forced a reassuring smile. Are you hungry? I asked my staff to prepare something a while ago. It should be here soon. Pepper, still a little shaken, pressed a hand to her stomach. The sudden hunger pangs surprised her. Yes, I am. Good. Tony gave her a gentle nod. You won't have to wait long. And there's so much more for me to explain, so much you need to know. You don't have to be afraid. I'm here. At his reassurance, Pepper managed a small, grateful smile and nodded. Meanwhile, Damien Ambalaka drove back to his estate, the night wind whispering through the open windows. His system pinged. A new candidate wanted to learn about and join the Void. Damien didn't hesitate. He knew immediately that Tony had convinced Pepper to come aboard. With Pepper's induction, Damien's Void energy reserves would swell by 5,000 points, 20 times the increase he'd received when Tony Stark joined. More importantly, Pepper's presence in the Void cult would help Tony finally embrace its power completely. Damien tapped the approval command, sealing her initiation. Damien didn't care how much Void energy Pepper funneled to him. He had bigger priorities now. Slipping into a loose, comfortable set of home clothes, he made his way down to the subterranean training arena. Once inside, he activated his hero template interface. A single emblem glowed before him, labeled Option Number 1. He had assumed from the start that every time he spread the Void's influence, he'd unlock new templates, and that, given a second chance, he would undoubtedly choose the terrifying Void Fear Korgus. With its dual Predator and Terror evolutionary talents, Korgus could ascend through multiple metamorphoses, granting near unstoppable survivability. Even before reaching full maturity, Korgus could challenge cosmic deities without fear of death. But now Damien realized that his choices wouldn't come all at once. Each additional believer in the Void would open up fresh templates for him to claim. With only one template currently available, the smartest pick was clear: Voidwalker Kassadin. Quiet, deadly, and perfectly attuned to traversing the Void's rifts, Kassadin gave Damien the mastery and mobility he needed for whatever came next. He selected the glowing emblem. As the interface warped around him, Damien braced for the power of the Voidwalker to flood his ins and for the next chapter of his destiny to begin. Damien's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the hero template for Voidwalker Kassadin. With Kassadin's void-walking ability, he could slip between galaxies at will, and with that freedom, he'd build his Void cult anywhere in the cosmos. Here on Blue Star, powerful figures kept him hemmed in. He'd learned long ago not to attract attention. But beyond the 9 realms, no one would dare stand in his way. Not even Thanos gave him pause. At least, not yet. The Mad Titan hadn't assembled all 6 Infinity Stones, so he wasn't the threat Damien feared most. Damien's true concern was the unknown figure who had wielded the full set of stones and whose power he'd only heard rumors about. Still, as soon as Thanos finished his collection, he'd be dangerous. Of course, there were other beings born under mightier destinies than Thanos's. Entire races whose raw power could eclipse a fate legend if they combined forces. Damien's confidence lay in speed. If he evolved faster than any of them, he'd render their alliances meaningless. He tapped Kassadin's icon. A chill thrill coursed through him. Are you sure you want to obtain Voidwalker Kassadin's hero template? The system's voice sounded in his mind. Once selected, it cannot be changed. Damien paused. Then, with a decisive nod, he confirmed. The Void awaited. Because hero templates are so rare and precious, the system paused the moment he chose and asked for confirmation. Damien had already made up his mind, so he pressed confirm. Instantly, a proud, world-weary voice echoed in his head. Few are able to travel between worlds. Kassadin. With those words came a torrent of knowledge. Arcane secrets he'd never dreamed of, the very laws of void energy. Overwhelmed but attuned, Damien felt it all pour into him, unlocking insights that felt like enlightenment. At the same moment, deep within the void, a dark purple stone materialized and fused itself into his chest. He closed his eyes and stood perfectly still as time stretched out around him. Moments blurred into hours, the sun's path through the sky barely registering until dusk fell. Only then did Damien truly finish absorbing the new information. When he opened his eyes, their inky black depths shone with flickers of gold. Everything around him, air, walls, even the faintest breeze, now pulsed with a violet glow of void energy he'd never perceived before. Damien inhaled, tasting the power that now coursed through him. The world had changed, so had he. Damien stood frozen as the world around him convulsed and reshaped itself. Drawing on every scrap of arcane theory he'd committed to memory, he thrust his right hand forward, and a jagged blade of rippling violet energy tore into existence. Its unstable edges tore at reality itself, warping the air in grotesque waves. A fierce surge of power coursed through him. Without a word of incantation, Damien rose into the air as tiny spheres of purple-black mana coalesced and whirled around his body. Under their eerie glow, his features sharpened, taking on a slightly menacing cast. He felt the void's energy buoy him effortlessly, flight no longer a distant skill, but an instinct born of pure magic. Calming his breath, he closed his eyes. Even from the basement's depths, his senses extended outward, the layers of stone and concrete falling away until he could perceive the world above as if he were soaring overhead. With a quiet exhalation, he propelled himself upward. As his foot touched the lobby floor, the ground beneath him cracked open in obsidian ripples. In a flash of violet light, his form dissolved and then reformed in the center of the first-floor entrance hall, the doors sliding shut behind him. One strives for perfection of the body and the other for mastery of magic, Damien murmured, recalling the old saying. Until the body fully matures, magic is the true sovereign. A swell of pride rose in him as he realized his spell had worked exactly as planned. He had passed cleanly through the barrier and emerged on the first floor in an instant. Chapter 46. Damien's Training. Damien opened the Kassadin Voidwalker interface. Across the top of the holographic display were 5 ability slots, 4 already detailed, the 5th still locked behind an unknown requirement. He studied each entry in turn. 1. Voidstone, innate passive. This fundamental trait weakens incoming magic. Spells below a certain threshold simply wash over you, and you can momentarily phase your body into pure void to bypass physical matter. Voidstone grows stronger on its own as you absorb more void energy. You cannot allocate skill points to it directly. 2. Void Ball, Evolution 0. By channeling void energy, you condense a sphere of nothingness and launch it at your target. On impact, the orb briefly seals the enemy's magic for 1 second. Each cast also weaves a layer of void shroud around you, bolstering your defenses against hostile spells. 3. Void Blade, Evolution 0. Passive, your normal attacks automatically draw in void energy, coating each strike in an etheric edge that deals increased damage. Active, focus your will to charge the blade deliberately, empowering your next magic attack with a dramatic surge of void power. 4. Energy Pulse, Evolutions 0. Passive absorption allows you, after casting a spell, to draw residual magic from the surrounding void within a 100-meter radius, reclaiming energy that would otherwise dissipate. The 5th slot remains shrouded, its icon blurred and inaccessible, a mystery awaiting discovery. Damien leaned back and ran a hand through his hair. 4 abilities, each at Evolution 0, meant there was plenty of room for growth. He flexed his fingers, picturing Voidstone's protective haze and the crackling energy of a fully charged void blade. Today's practice would begin with simpler drills, forming countless void balls, each one a step toward true mastery of the void. When magic and raw mana swell beyond a certain threshold, they discharge in rippling pulses, bursts of energy whose strength and radius scale with the amount you've absorbed. Skill, Void Descending Evolutions, 0 description. Whenever you slip into the void and re-emerge at will, you can trigger a localized void explosion, inflicting damage on everything around your exit point. Damien stared at his screen, tracing the outline of each Voidwalker spell. Voidwalkers are built like arcane artillery, devastating at range but fragile up close. Most mages can unleash torrents of magic, yet the moment an enemy closes in, they're sitting ducks. That vulnerability no longer worried him, thanks to Kha'Zix, the Void Reaver. With that ally's predatory instincts weaving through the void, Damien could evade or ambush foes who dared come too near. Of his 5 void-based skills, only 1, Void Stone, grew passively, drawing in void energy and evolving over time. The remaining 4 were ripe for manual upgrades. After the feast at Tony's house, Damien's evolution point counter read 875,000. He'd assumed he'd fall short of any meaningful enhancement, yet as he scrolled through the skill menu, he realized each of the 4 upgradable abilities was ready for evolution. A grin tugged at his lips. Tonight, he'd strengthen every spell at his disposal. By dawn, he'd be more than a mage. He'd be a living tempest of void energy, unstoppable at any distance. Damien had discovered a remarkable quirk. The evolution trees of Voidwalker Kassadin and Void Reaver Kha'Zix overlapped in just the right way to let him redirect up to 10,000 evolution points at will. That loophole explained how his Void Blast had skyrocketed to an incredible level 50. He'd pumped dozens of points into it long before reaching his 100th total evolution. Normally, a hero must max out all lesser skills before advancing the ultimate, but Damien ignored convention. With a single, decisive move, he poured 490,000 evolution points into his ultimate, Void Invasion, launching it straight to level 50. The instant the points registered, a flood of arcane knowledge surged into his mind. He could sense an invisible D of energy weaving through heaven, earth, and the void itself. Damien yearned to push Void Invasion all the way to level 100, but he quickly realized that doing so would require his other abilities to keep pace. Without hesitation, he cycled through his remaining 3 skills, evolving each one 10 additional times. As the final points settled, Damien felt his powers coalesce, each skill reshaped and stronger than ever before, ready to bend reality itself to his will. Chapter 7. The Evolving Void. Damien stood alone in the silent training arena, the air humming with latent magic. His eyes glowed faintly as he tested the latest breakthrough in his void mastery. First came the condensed void orb, a 10th-tier evolution of the basic void ball. With a sweeping gesture, Damien gathered the emptiness around him into a perfect sphere of shimmering black light. He hurled it at the practice golem. On impact, the orb dissolved into tendrils of void force, flooding the construct's core. For 3 heartbeats, its gears stuttered and ground to a halt as the orb's power disrupted its magical circuits. At the same time, Damien's body was sheathed in the translucent membrane of a void robe, shielding him from any backlash of hostile enchantment. Next, he drew the void blade, its edge crackling with crackling void energy. This too was a 10th-tier evolution. Each strike now siphoned the power of the void and laced Damien's form with invisible magic that amplified his damage. He lunged forward and slashed through the dummy's reinforced iron shell. The blade cut as if through mist. Then, gathering his will, Damien channeled additional void energy into the blade. A single charged thrust sent a wave of black-white fissures through the training golem, toppling it in one devastating blow. He let the dagger clatter to the ground and closed his eyes, tapping into his passive ability, the energy pulse. Within a radius of 1,100 meters, he drew in the drifting magic and ambient life force. Streams of power, ancient and hidden, poured into him until his limbs thrummed with potential. With a gesture, he released a colossal shockwave of void energy. The ground trembled, nearby stones cracked, the shock dissipated in ripples of silent force. Finally, Damien reached the pinnacle of his current mastery, void descending, now evolved 50 times over. He raised a hand to the sky and slipped his consciousness beyond the veil of reality. He saw the latticework of spatial foundations, the hidden seams between one place and the next. Through this vision, he pinpointed every corner of the arena and even sensed distant fissures in the fabric of space itself. When he opened his eyes, the afternoon sun had dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the arena floor. Damien allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Each evolution had brought him closer to mastering the void's infinite depths, and he was only getting started. When you slip into the void and travel its depths, you can unleash a void explosion at will, laying waste to all in the vicinity. These powers will only grow stronger once you reclaim your hero prototype. "Your magic is useless against me," Kassadin taunted, his voice cool with arrogance. Damien allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Kassadin's overconfidence was the surest sign that Damien had already absorbed the lion's share of the hero template's power. With deliberate calm, he closed his eyes and reached out with his senses. In an instant, the fabric of reality fell away. Damien perceived the cosmos in all its splendor, a tapestry of distant suns and nebula, each starburst a pinpoint of raw energy. The light closer to him glowed more brilliantly, his own world, while faint, smaller luminaries stretched away into the blackness. With this ability, he could step directly into deep space. Yet Damien withheld himself. There was no glory in carelessly flinging oneself into the void. Few things were more foolish than mistaking a star for empty darkness. Before venturing further, he needed control, testing. Otherwise, an unwary traveler might plunge into the heart of a sun and become the most idiotic time jumper in history. Guiding his focus away from the maelstrom of distant lights, Damien settled on the familiar blue planet below, a stable anchor for his first experiment. Carefully, he began to draw upon the nascent void energies, determined to master them on solid ground before charting a course among the stars. Damien closed his eyes and let his awareness expand until he felt himself hovering above the universe. Far below, New York City spread out like a vast ant farm, its inhabitants reduced to specks moving between towering skyscrapers, mountain ridges, rivers, and sprawling landmasses. He couldn't hear their voices, of course, only the muted hum of a world seen from such a distance. But that only reassured him. Being able to survey each light spot from above meant he wouldn't accidentally teleport into a deadly zone. Satisfied, Damien fixed his focus on his manner. He called upon the void's energy in the surrounding space. With a silent crackle, reality tore open, and Damien's form dissolved into a shaft of purple light. In the next instant, he reappeared high above the expansive estate just outside town. Carefully modulating his power, he drifted down, determined not to send a stray burst of energy smashing through the roof. When his feet touched the earth, a broad smile curved his lips. Now that he'd taken his first step in controlling this immense power, the universe lay open to him, and with it the chance to spread the will of the void to distant worlds. He resolved to keep practicing these short-range jumps until he mastered them completely. Long-distance travel wasn't my goal. Once you know what distant worlds look like, long jumps lose their novelty, and for now, void descent is simply a teleportation tool. To make it truly battle-worthy, I need to master short-range void jumps on demand. So Damien set out for a deserted stretch of ocean and plunged into the deep sea. Day after day, he practiced until, whenever he fixated on a point within his line of sight, he could vanish and reappear there in an instant. This skill would not only sharpen his combat edge, but also lend credibility to his message, helping him guide other beings across the universe to embrace the void. As for more elaborate feats, like establishing a network of permanent teleportation nodes capable of transporting entire groups, Damien decided to focus on the fundamentals first and tackle those advanced techniques later. Chapter 47. Changes in 3 months. Over the next 3 months, Damien devoted himself to mastering void magic, practicing every waking moment except when he ate. He knew that raw power meant nothing without perfect control, so he deliberately kept his casting slow and measured at first. Day after day, he honed each gesture and incantation, refusing to hurry the process. In just over 2 months, he had amassed a huge stockpile of evolution points, and every single one went straight into Kayx's void skin ability. 81 evolutions later, the void skin was stronger than ever. At the same time, Damien's void predator form, Kha'Zix itself, had evolved 300 times, but upon reaching that 300th upgrade, the evolution cost spiked by 50%, now a staggering 1.5 million points per evolution. The sudden jump gave Damien pause, but he reminded himself there was still time to unlock more hero templates. With that in mind, he funneled every new point into void skin, determined to drive its evolution count well beyond 100. 81 successive evolutions of his void skin had pushed Damien's body to its breaking point, and then beyond. His raw strength surged so dramatically that he could now fly at Mach 6 under his own power, a speed so blistering that in tight quarters, dashing through the air outpaced even void magic spatial jumps. He still lacked a proper test subject for gauging the absolute limits of his strength, but his defenses spoke for themselves. His reinforced flesh shrugged off the razor-wind buffet that accompanies supersonic flight. When he channeled the void itself into his motion, that velocity climbed to Mach 8. In just 9 months, Damien had doubled his top speed and honed both his powers and his physical mastery to a razor's edge. Poised on the threshold of the cosmos and ready to spread the will of the void, he took a final sip of his post-training breakfast. With a thought, he cast his awareness over New York City one last time, then vanished in an instant, leaving only a faint ripple in the early morning air. After 3 months of steady growth, Tony Stark had undergone 37 evolutions, each granting him 2,000 void energy, for a total gain of 74,000. Pepper, perhaps less hungry for power, had only evolved 17 times in the same period, earning 100 void energy per evolution and amassing just 1s in 700. Against Tony's formidable destiny, her contribution was modest, but it was better than nothing. Damien's true strategy was to draw in those with weaker fates. Individually, their void energy offerings were small, but in numbers they could swell to an astonishing sum. At present, Damien himself had only about 175,000 void energy, still a long way from the 100 million he would need to trade for the tyrant alien void predator. Yet once he set foot among the stars, that goal wouldn't seem so distant. The universe is rich with countless technologies, and to command the tyrant alien's power over them would grant him near-limitless informational reach. Tony Stark and Pepper Potts were enjoying a quiet breakfast in the kitchen. Pepper planned to head into Stark Industries right after, while Tony intended to return to his lab and dive back into his latest project. Mid-morning sunlight filtered through the windows until the air before them rippled and tore open, forming a swirling purple-black vortex. Tony's fork paused halfway to his mouth as his eyes narrowed. He'd seen that signature void once before. Pepper's heart thudded against her ribs. Over the years, Tony had filled her in on more than just weapons research. He'd let her in on the existence of gods, interstellar threats, and other secrets most people couldn't even imagine. Could this sudden portal mean their quiet morning had been compromised? Before they could draw breath, a tall, striking young man stepped cleanly through the breach. Jet-black hair, equally dark eyes, and an air of calm power announced him at a glance. "Good morning, Mr. Ambalaka," Pepper said, forcing her composure back into place. Tony held his gaze on the newcomer. He already recognized the signature of Damien Ambalaka's telekinetic rift. This purple-black hole was entirely his doing. Damien's sudden arrival in Tony Stark's workshop drew an amused look from the armored genius. Tony wiped his hands on a rag and set aside the half-finished snack he'd been tinkering with. "Damien," he said, leaning back in his chair, "this is the first time you've shown up here without me sending an invitation. You've got something on your mind, haven't you?" Damien offered a wry smile. "You could say that. I've decided to leave Blue Star, and roam the universe." The moment the words left his lips, the dark rift that had trailed behind him flickered and vanished as if it had never been. Tony's eyebrows rose. "I'd love nothing more than to explore the stars with you," he admitted, "but right now, I'm not strong enough." He set down his fork and clenched his fists. Over the past 3 months, Tony had felt himself transform again and again. His body had reverted to the vigor of his 24-year-old self, handsome, energetic, and brimming with power that surpassed any ordinary humans. Yet he hadn't forgotten why he'd ventured into the void in the first place. Between his constant evolution and sizable appetite, he'd driven his research forward without pause. In just 90 days, he discovered several new elements, perfected an arc reactor design only he could build, and continuously refined his armor to unprecedented levels. Damien nodded, understanding the weight behind Tony's words. "Then let me help you get stronger," he said quietly. "Once we both stand at our peak, we'll chart a course for the stars, together." Damien's battered steel suit may look crude next to Tony Stark's latest prototypes, but it serves its purpose, and then some. Unlike Stark's marks, which can cruise at Mach 3, project energy beams, and self-repair on the fly, Damien's armor does none of that. It can't fly unaided, let alone break the sound barrier. Its only real advantage is that durable steel helm, which hides his eyes and preserves his anonymity. To this day, he's never revealed his face in public. Whenever he ventures out, he dons the helmet. Some critics call his look ostentatious, but Damien's voice and every gesture fit the persona he's crafted. He isn't reckless. He never uses the armor simply for show. and he's never sparked any major incidents. In fact, compared to the careful choreography Damien must maintain, Pepper Potts' situation seems almost effortless. Pepper told him recently that she feels her body has undergone more than 10 distinct phases of evolution, each one rolling out slowly, like tectonic plates shifting. Even Tony admits he has no real idea whether her mindset or her chosen training regimen has steered this transformation. Whatever the cause, Pepper's strength and resilience now far exceed those of an average person. Yet the change is subtle. Unless you're looking for it, you'd never guess how much stronger she's become. The most striking difference is Damien's appearance. He now looks just as he did at 20, his skin smoother and more radiant than ever, and his confident bearing gives him an even greater charisma. Perhaps it's from all he's seen and learned that his ageless looks aren't a fluke, but whatever the reason, he no longer mumbles to himself like he once did. Outside, rumors swirl that he's quietly had microplastic surgery or spares no expense on elite skincare. Compared to being labeled an alien, those whispers hardly faze him. His calm, assured smile makes it clear. None of it dents his spirits. Please cast your vote. Chapter 48, Gazing at the Milky Way. These past 3 months have proven one thing. This is only the beginning of your new life. There's no need to rush or be anxious. Soon enough, you and I will journey into the stars together, exploring worlds no one here has ever seen. Damien met Tony Stark's steady gaze and felt a wave of relief wash over him. Stark had kept his promise. He hadn't once tried to devour or absorb another living creature. Though Damien's evolution had been gradual, that deliberate pace had kept him from falling into the abyss of unchecked hunger. "I can feel it," Damien said, a smile tugging at his lips. "My face grows younger, my strength surges. Yet the more I grow, the more I realize how small I still am compared to the vastness out there." Tony's expression softened. "You'll adapt, and when you do, you'll be ready for everything the universe throws at you." Damien nodded, determination shining in his eyes as he lifted his gaze to the night sky, where the pale ribbon of the Milky Way stretched endlessly overhead. Tony reclined in his workshop chair, swirling a tumbler of scotch as he activated the hollow communicator. Across the shimmering projection stood Damien, his expression calm and unreadable. "Damien," Tony began, "I've been thinking, could you make a trip out into the cosmos for me?" Damien raised an eyebrow. "You mean beyond Earth's orbit?" "Beyond Earth, beyond even our galaxy," Tony said, leaning forward. "I need you to bring me back anything. Alien technology, exotic raw materials, whatever you can find out there." He tapped a few commands on his desk. "As for compensation, you name it. Cash, credit on your account. Hell, I can give you Stark Industries stock. The more advanced the tech you bring in, the higher the company's value climbs. You'll be able to pull out as much money as you want." Tony paused, his eyes gleaming with the prospect of discovery. "You know better than anyone that 8 years from now, Blue Star is going to face a crisis no one's expecting. If we can reverse engineer something truly revolutionary, we can get ahead of it. I trust you, Damien. There's no reason you'd steer me wrong. You said yourself you can cross the universe and back at will." Damien considered Tony's offer in silence, the faint hum of the workshop's machinery filling the gap. Finally, he gave a small nod. "Then it shouldn't be a problem," he said quietly. "I'll see what I can bring back." Tony's grin widened. "That's all I ask." And with that, their partnership, one grounded in Earth's brilliance and the boundless frontier beyond, was sealed. "That sounds excellent. I'll be eagerly awaiting your good news," Pepper said, her tone bright. Tony Stark gave a confident nod. "While you're away, I'll have someone oversee all the estates registered under your name. I promise they'll remain spotless and secure until your return." Damien returned Tony's smile. He wasn't surprised by the generous offer. He knew how reliable his friend was, but he still appreciated it. "Thanks, Tony. And Miss Potts," he added, turning to Pepper. "It's been over 2 months since we last met. You look as radiant as ever." Pepper's cheeks warmed at the compliment. She offered a graceful curtsy. "You're too kind, Mr. Ambalaka. Truly, this wouldn't have been possible without your support." Her words sent a pleased flush through Damien. He'd already gathered from Tony just how much influence Damien Ambalaka wielded, and Tony had gently reminded her to mind her manners around him. After all, more people, or strange new creatures might be drawn into the void before long, and decorum would be essential. Pepper's tone turned grave as she addressed Damien and Tony. Just because we were among the first to enter the void doesn't mean someone else out there can't become far more powerful once they tap into it. So be careful what you say around outsiders. One careless word could unleash unimaginable consequences. Damien listened closely, already aware of how this lawless realm could warp reality and character. Ike. He'd felt its pull reshape his own instincts since he arrived. Pepper's features softened into a reassuring smile. You two seem to be adapting well. Don't worry. All right, Damien replied, stretching. I'm going to take a walk through the cosmos. You guys can go ahead and eat. No rush. If anything unusual happens back on Blue Star, Tony, send me a message right away. Pepper turned to Tony, her eyes earnest. Got it, Tony said. I'll let you know the moment something comes up. Before Damien could step forward, a tiny black hole flickered into existence beneath his feet and vanished. Pepper's eyes shone with admiration. With his gift, Damien can move instantly between Blue Star and the wider universe. His abilities really are beyond imagination. As Damien disappeared into the void, Pepper let out a breath, a mixture of pride and concern in her voice. He's come so far. His powers don't end there. Damien continued, voice calm and steady. We're only at the beginning of our evolution. If you take good care of Gao Muiyuan, you'll grow ever stronger in time. And once we've truly mastered our abilities, we'll set off across the universe together, discovering the customs of every world. We'll walk among the stars and witness all the marvels we once could only dream of, held back by our limited technology and strength. Tony Stark's eyes gleamed as he absorbed Damien's words. He'd faced nightmarish creatures, one even capable of jumping from star to star, and so he wasn't startled by this revelation of power. What struck him instead was the gulf between Damien's growing might and his own. Sounds good, Tony said at last. Pepper Potts looked on, her gaze softening with longing. Moments later, Damien stood alone on the lunar surface, the distant blue orb of Earth hanging in the black sky. The chill of space wrapped around him like a cool breeze, and he breathed it in, ready for whatever came next. Damien had always possessed the unusual gift of physically traversing the cosmos, but without a vessel or any means of interplanetary travel, he'd never actually set foot beyond his own star system. Now, however, armed with the Void Walker's power to step through the void itself, he finally had the freedom to explore alien worlds. And Damien already had a plan. His first objective was simple: establish himself as a bounty hunter. He'd earn credits hunting fugitives and scouring the darker corners of known space. With enough wealth and renown, he'd found the Void Cult, a movement built around his mastery of the void. That fame would draw alien seekers to him, eager for guidance or power. He wouldn't need to chase them down, they'd come willingly. As for vibranium, Damien dismissed the idea of raiding Wakanda. On his homeworld, vibranium was a resource beyond replication, but in the wider universe, it wasn't impossibly rare, just famously elusive. It could be bought, stolen, or unearthed like any other precious material. With his wits and newfound talents, he could obtain it when the time was right. Concentrating, Damien allowed his consciousness to drift free of his body. His physical form remained rooted on his little observatory atop Blue Star's highlands, but his mind soared, scanning star clusters and nebula in a single thought. He sought a world of advanced civilization, one with credits to spend and secrets to trade. But before he could set foot on any planet, he'd need a universal translator, or else he'd be lost in a tangle of alien tongues. Floating in the void's silent embrace, Damien mapped out potential destinations. Soon, he would descend to a new world, his name whispered by bounties and scholars alike. The universe awaited, and he was finally ready to claim it. Damien of Blue Star Comitage was standing just inside his front door when a sudden chill ran down his spine. He bolted outside and stared up into the night sky, heart pounding. Something out there, looming over Blue Star, radiated a cold, terrifying presence. Damien pressed a hand to his temple, summoning the golden glow of his enhanced vision. Even that gift couldn't penetrate the planet's upper atmosphere. No matter how hard he looked, the intruder remained hidden in the darkness. Far above him, in the shining halls of Asgard, Heimdall stood sentinel before the Rainbow Bridge. His all-seeing golden eyes swept across the 9 realms as always, until a foreign gaze locked onto him. It was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, a silent, malevolent scrutiny that sent shivers through his immortal bones. Instinctively, Heimdall followed its source, flooding his vision with light, only to find himself plunged into unending blackness. And there, suspended in that void, hovered a single star of inky purple-black, pulsing with dreadful intent. In all his aeons of watchfulness, Heimdall had never witnessed anything so sinister. Damien stared skyward, puzzled by the dark star that had suddenly appeared above Asgard. He had no idea where it came from, but he was certain of one thing. The All-Father must have sensed it too. Heimdall's warning still echoed in his ears. Something unseen was watching them. In the great temple hall, Odin sat alone, silver hair catching the torchlight as he swirled a goblet of deep red wine. Damien lingered at the edge of the chamber, tense with anticipation. Then the air above the palace grounds quivered, as if reality itself had paused to gasp. With a sudden, violent gesture, Odin flung his goblet aside. A blaze of golden runes erupted around him, forging armor of living light. He rose to his full imposing height and bellowed, "Who dares spy on Asgard?" Silence fell heavier than any storm. The sense of intrusion vanished as swiftly as it had come. Nearby, a squad of Asgardian guards had been patrolling the palace steps. Startled by their king's shout, they formed ranks and rushed forward, helmets clanging, spears ready. But when they reached the temple entrance, they saw only Odin, stern, radiant, unbowed, and not a trace of enemy or otherworldly energy. They exchanged uneasy glances, every one of them longing to ask what had happened, yet none dared speak before the All-Father himself. Chapter 49, When My Glory Reappears. A kilometer-wide violet rift tore open on the lunar surface. Damien's form shimmered into strands of purple light and vanished. At the same instant, a matching void portal flickered into existence above Xandar, a full light-year away. Moments later, Damien stepped through and reappeared on the world below. The unleashed void energy detonated with cataclysmic force. A purple-black shockwave rippled outward, distorting space-time itself. Damien exhaled in relief. Had he teleported directly into Xandar City, the blast might have annihilated everything in sight. This was his first attempt at a light-year-scale void descent. He couldn't predict exactly how much residual energy would erupt on arrival, so he chose a cautious approach. Open the portal well above the surface, then slip in covertly to his true objective. Earlier, while sweeping the galactic charts for his destination, he had caught a glimpse of Asgard. Odin's senses must have been alert, yet Damien vanished so swiftly that the All-Father likely never pinpointed his exact location. Now another void rift blossomed beneath him. In the next heartbeat, Damien emerged amid Xandar's untamed hinterlands. Craggy hills, crystal streams, and dense, whispering forests stretching as far as the eye could see. He paused, letting the tranquil beauty of the wilderness wash over him. This was only the beginning. With his glory awaiting, Damien tightened his cloak and stepped forward into the unknown. Damien hovered a few meters above the reddish soil of Xandar Prime and took in the view. Although this planet was officially habitable, its air and light felt only mildly different from those of his homeworld, Blue Star. He recalled that Xandar was one of the legendary interstellar empires in the old Earth legends. Surely here he could secure some credits and, more importantly, a working cosmic translator. Closing his eyes, Damien reached into the void that hummed beneath his skin. A faint ripple of energy spread outward, dissolving his simple travel robes. In their place coalesced a set of gleaming battle plates, deep purple armor trimmed in gold, a flowing white cloak draped over his shoulders, and a sleek golden mask that obscured his features. His irises burned bright with molten light, lending him an aura both mysterious and awe-inspiring. He opened his eyes and surveyed himself in the low gravity. If he was to impose the void's will upon this realm, he needed a new persona, one that would keep his true identity buried beneath layers of legend. With a measured breath, he tested the name on his tongue. Kassadin. It resonated perfectly. Assuming this new mantle, Kassadin rose silently into the sky and set his course for the nearest urban sprawl, some 200 kilometers to the west. Less than half an hour later, he spotted the city's massive perimeter wall looming ahead, a seamless blend of gleaming metal and iridescent energy fields, unmistakably high-tech and heavily fortified. Below that barrier lay the gateway to Xandar's wonders, and to the resources he needed to further his mysterious agenda. Sunlight danced across the polished metal of Xandar's outer walls, their gleaming surfaces a clear declaration of the Empire's prestige. As one of the most renowned powers in the galaxy, Xandar didn't skimp on appearances. Patrol frigates hovered in precise formations above the ramparts, engines humming softly as they kept a vigilant watch. Damien stepped off his shuttle and onto the smooth landing platform, his boots clicking against the metal. With calm, measured strides, he made his way toward the city gate. He had no wish to stir up trouble. So long as the Xandarians gave him passage, he planned to remain unobtrusive. His sole objective was to hire a skilled cosmic translator and learn where the next bounty contract awaited. All around him, dozens of humanoid figures went about their business, tall and slender, short and stocky, covered in familiar shades of flesh and fur that might have belonged to Blue Star natives. Had he not known he'd arrived on Xandar, he might have assumed he was still on his home planet. Yet despite the bustle, Damien's presence did not go unnoticed. Cloaked in an aura of quiet authority, his features half hidden by shadow, he looked every bit the man accustomed to command, a mystery that drew curious glances from the crowd as he approached the gate. The guards at the city gate exchanged uneasy glances, each waiting for one of the others to step forward and take the newcomer's registration. At last, a towering figure in a crisp military uniform, nearly 1.9 meters tall and built like a fortress, snorted in contempt. "You're acting like it's some grand threat. It's just a name check," he chided his fellows. With that, he strode down the narrow corridor beneath the battlement walls as Damien came to a halt before him. "Name," he demanded. "Place of origin, and your purpose for entering the city." He spoke in the common tongue while dexterously tapping commands into the slender, boxy device strapped to his wrist. But when his questions hung in the morning air, Damien stood silent, eyes fixed intently on the guard. The soldier's confident posture wavered. He squared his shoulders and regarded Damien with mounting suspicion. Damien had assumed he'd need an interplanetary translator. Without one, he expected to catch nothing but noise. Yet every word the guard had uttered rang perfectly clear in his mind. Gathering himself, Damien answered in the same accent, "My name is Cassidin. I come from the void." For a heartbeat, the guard stared as though he'd been struck. His fingers froze above the registration device. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he repeated, "Cassidin, from the void?" Damien stood before the city guard's booth, doing his best to look calm. The guard peered at him over a reinforced viewport. "What's your purpose for coming to Xandar?" the guard demanded. "I'm here to gather some information," Damien replied steadily. The guard listened intently as Damien spoke an unfamiliar tongue, then glanced down at the small translator device strapped to his wrist. The screen flickered, language code C-53. With so many inhabited worlds in the galaxy, C-53 didn't immediately register by its planetary nickname, but the guard's tension eased when Damien answered every question without hesitation. "Name?" the guard prompted. "Damien of C-53, he answered. The guard tapped his translator. "Registration complete. This planet is called Xandar. Since it's your first visit, you're granted a 7-day permit. During that time, our security forces will be watching the entire city. Behave yourself. Any infraction and you'll be detained on the spot and sent to the trial court. Punishments there will correspond to the severity of your offense." Damien nodded once, tucked his hood back over his head, and slipped past the booth into the bustling streets of Xandar, 7 days to find what he'd come for. Damien approached the security checkpoint at Xandar's city gate, where a tall guard in polished cerulean armor blocked the energy barrier's path. The guard's expression was unreadable as he spoke. "In this sector, contraband is confiscated immediately," he warned in a low voice. "In serious cases, offenders are executed, so tread carefully." Damien lifted his hands into a neutral gesture. "Understood. I have no intention of causing trouble." The guard, who gave his name as Dam, activated a handheld scanner. A pale blue beam swept across Damien's armor, illuminating every seam. Data scrolled past on the guard's visor. After a few heartbeats, Dam deactivated the barrier and stepped aside. "All clear," he said. "You may enter." Damien nodded and passed through. He wasn't worried. The ID chip he carried was the work of a void weaver, packed with fabricated credentials. No routine scan could penetrate its illusions. Once inside the corridor, Damien paused and called back. "Excuse me, where would a bounty hunter pick up jobs on Xandar?" Dam turned to look at him. "A bounty hunter," he repeated, quirking an eyebrow. "You don't look like one. More like someone with pull, maybe a big shot." Damien let a faint smile cross his lips. "Let's just say I've had my share of glory in the past, but times have changed." Dam studied him for another moment, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Then he pointed down a row of neon-lit stalls. "Head for the central arcade. The bounty board is next to the security kiosk, 2 corridors in. You'll find what you need there." "Thank you," Damien replied, slinging his satchel higher on his shoulder. With that, he turned and melted into the flow of travelers, each step taking him closer to the next chapter of his story and the dangerous assignments that awaited him on Xandar. "I need to earn some credits by taking on bounty contracts," Damien admitted, wincing as though struck by a sudden ache. He cleared his throat and offered a sheepish apology. "Sorry, I didn't mean to hit a sore spot." The man in front of him grinned. "If you're serious about bounty hunting, listen up. Once you reach the city gates, head 20 clicks east into the Link District. You'll find the bounty bar there. Hunters congregate inside. It's hard to miss." Damien let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Relief and gratitude softened his features. "Thank you for the direction. When I've restored my reputation, I'll make sure to return the favor." The man gave a knowing nod. "Don't hesitate to look me up if you carve out a name for yourself and need backup. I'll have your 6. Damien clasped the man's shoulder, determination rekindling in his eyes. The ruin of his family's honor had left him penniless and adrift. After blowing through his inheritance, poverty now felt like a foreign master he couldn't escape. But in the world they lived in, many disgraced heirs found a path to redemption and fortune by claiming bounties. Damien vowed he would be one of them. Cassidon wasn't the first, and he certainly wouldn't be the last. When Damien heard those words, he gave them little thought, yet still managed a sincere nod. "Someday," he said, forcing a reassuring smile, "you might even survive your next bounty mission." With the destination now clear, Damien allowed himself a brief nod before turning his back on Cassidon and striding off toward the city. Chapter 50, Bounty Bar. After Damien slipped away, his fellow guards huddled together, eyes still on the path he'd taken. "Did you see that guy? He doesn't look ordinary," one of them murmured. "He's got the aura of someone far above our rank," another said. "In all my years on the guard, I've only ever felt that vibe twice before." "Right," chimed a third. "You all know who I mean. Dana Thrall, Senior Officer of the Nova Corps, and Supreme Commander Irani Real. Those are the 2 real power players we respect and fear." "Maybe we should have asked him for help," someone ventured. "Who knows when we might need an ally like that?" "I still can't believe I didn't go introduce myself," Damien admitted, leaning closer. "That could have been my chance." They glanced at one another, each recalling the stranger's confident stride and unshakable calm. It was clear they just crossed paths with someone extraordinary, someone whose reputation would only grow from here. And by the reverent way they spoke of Thrall and Real, it was obvious that whoever that newcomer was, he ranked among the very few they'd always look up to. Brand didn't really listen to the commander's speech. He was too busy watching the young hunter stride away across the courtyard. Through the rising dawn light, Damien's tall figure grew smaller until he vanished beyond the gate. Behind him, the commander's words still echoed faintly. "The glory of our past was shattered in an instant, and it could be wiped out again. But we're not here simply to chase bounties for coin. We want to rebuild that glory. You especially, you weren't born to take on lowly contracts. In another life, you'd have been the one issuing bounties, not accepting them. When a man of your caliber faces upheaval like this, his pride takes a hard blow. I may have struck a nerve, so afterward I offered a few words of encouragement." Brand shook his head and finally spoke. If he hadn't turned down that last assignment, what the commander said today might have been the turning point in his life. Eamon, the guard at his side, shrugged. "Shame, isn't it? Had he accepted, he probably wouldn't be off wandering the frontier now." Brand grinned wryly. But useful or not, let's make sure we remember his name. Could come in handy someday. Eamon frowned. What was it again? Cassidin? That's the one, Cassidin. Odd name. And what's wrong with odd? Bran tossed his head, already moving toward the barracks, the morning's conversation already slipping from his mind. Chapter 1, Gate 17. Yeah, you're not ordinary, just plain weird. A cluster of gate guards at Checkpoint 17 exchanged sly grins, whispering behind their hands. They were civilians by trade, drafted into guard duty to register arrivals, file routine reports, and, if fortune smiled, enjoy long, uneventful days. Unless an enemy fleet showed up on the horizon, real danger was a rarity. Mostly it was leaning on consoles, trading gossip, bragging up exploits, and punching the clock at shift's end. Damien stood off to one side, arms folded and jaw clenched. He pretended not to care, but their words stung. In the colony's social pecking order, gatekeepers ranked only a notch above ordinary citizens. Their pay and perks were marginally better, but they wielded no real authority. Heroism was reserved for someone else. They all envied the Nova Corps, an elite force whose members donned high-tech Nova suits and piloted starfighters, cruisers, even colossal battle carriers. Each of these guards nursed a private dream of joining their ranks, blasting off into space, carving a name for themselves among the stars. But enrollment in the Nova Corps was no mere application form. It demanded exceptional talent, yes, but more crucially, the right connections. Without influential backers, political sponsors, powerful families, or an unbelievable stroke of luck, even the most brilliant cadets found the selection process a brick wall. With those connections, however, every hurdle seemed to vanish. Privilege, it seemed, was the single most valuable currency in any corner of the galaxy. Once Damien had the intelligence he needed, he stepped out of the shadowy corridor and into the heart of Xandar City. He strolled at an easy pace, taking in every wonder around him. Towering spires of steel and glass stretched skyward, linked by glowing sky bridges that pulsed with neon light. Below them, magnetic platforms drifted silently along aerial lanes, ferrying passengers from one district to the next. Compact data sondes hovered in predictable patterns, their multi-lens arrays scanning the cityscape and transmitting streams of information in real time. Compared to Earth, known here as Blue Star, Xandar was light years ahead. Here, people stood on disc-shaped hoverpods that lifted them effortlessly off the pavement. Handheld survey instruments could peer across entire continents, instantly cataloging terrain and weather patterns. Now and then a squadron of sleek Delta Wing fighters tore through the cloud layer overhead. Damien braced for a thunderous roar, but they passed nearly silent, no sonic boom, no engine rumble. He wondered whether their whisper-quiet flight was the product of advanced propulsion or some form of acoustic cloaking. On the busy sidewalks below, shopfronts showcased exotic goods from distant star systems, luminescent crystals that stored data, living circuitry woven from bioluminescent filaments, and fabrics that shifted color at the wearer's command. Every few steps, Damien caught curious glances aimed at his earth-tone jacket and well-worn boots. Here, any passerby in unfamiliar clothing was instantly tagged an alien, perhaps a thrill-seeking tourist, a desperate refugee, or a heartless bounty hunter. Locals knew better than to interrupt them, so no one came forward to say hello. Damien didn't mind. It gave him the freedom to observe and to blend in until it was time to move on. Damien stepped off the crowded Skytram onto Xandar's bustling streets and immediately noticed something odd. Despite carrying a state-of-the-art cosmic translator, he couldn't make sense of half the languages around him. Apparently, not everyone on this world bothered with one. That suited him fine. He preferred blending in anyway. His mission here wasn't conquest or sabotage, but opportunity. He'd come to Xandar seeking bounty contracts, anything that would help him bank enough credits to found the Void Cult. A fledgling organization needed a spotless reputation from day one, so he intended to play the part of a law-abiding, justice-seeking mercenary. For 20 minutes, he wandered through neon-lit plazas and between soaring chrome towers, taking in the kaleidoscope of alien street vendors, holographic ads, and jittery crowds. When he finally arrived in the neighborhood where Dam, his local contact, said the bounty bar was supposed to be, he realized he couldn't read a single billboard. The script looked unfamiliar, the fonts alien. Damien shrugged it off, activated the special sensors embedded beneath his eyes, and watched as his irises glowed gold. Within seconds, he detected a cluster of heightened biosignatures, raised decibel levels, and the faintest trace of combat gear, classic signs of a bounty hunter's hangout. A lively bar lay just 1 kilometer away. He tapped a button on his gauntlet. In the next instant, he materialized on the bar's shady walkway. Pushing open the heavy steel door, he was immediately enveloped by pounding bass, swirling neon beams, and the heat of half-dressed dancers swaying on elevated platforms. This was exactly the kind of place where information on new jobs would flow freely, for the right price. Damien slipped off his hood, stepped up to the nearest crowded table, and prepared to make his move. The Void Cult would have its seed money soon enough. Damien stepped into the seedy cantina, where aliens of every shape and size laughed, clanked glasses, and ogled the dancers weaving through the crowd. Here, bounty hunting was the fastest path to a fat credit balance, and just as quick to vanish in a haze of celebration. Most of these hunters lived by that cycle. Hunt, earn, spend, repeat. His arrival drew only a few curious glances. Those quickly returned to the blonde dancer on the makeshift stage or the beautiful companions cradled in patrons' arms. Unfazed, Damien threaded his way through the crowd toward the polished onyx bar. There, perched on a high stool, was a striking woman in a black bunny costume. Her golden hair gleamed under the neon lights, and her sharp eyes tracked him as he approached. Intrigued by his dark, tailored coat and the quiet confidence he radiated, she tapped a slender finger against the bar's transparent holoscreen. Lines of data scrolled into view. Cassidon, Sector C53. No age, no rank, just a name and a region. She raised an eyebrow. "Are you here to assign a contract?" she asked, her tone both professional and playful, "or to claim one?" Her lips curved into a fox-like smile. Damien paused, met her gaze, and quietly answered. The hunt was about to begin. Damien strode up to the counter, his boots thudding softly against the tavern's worn floorboards. The bunny girl attendant, her fur-tipped ears twitching, tilted her head and offered him a sultry smile. "Where are you off to pick up a mission?" she asked, her voice low and inviting. He met her gaze without flinching. "The bounty board," he said bluntly. "I'm here for my first assignment." Her eyes lit up. "First assignment, huh, Mr. Cassidon?" She gestured toward a wooden posting on the far wall. "Head over there, on the left. That's where the newest bounties are listed." "I'll take a look," Damien replied, turning toward the board. "Good," she purred. "And when you get back, alive, I expect you to let me buy you a drink." Damien hesitated only a moment, then nodded once and walked away. As he passed between the tables, the bunny girl watched him go, lips curved in thought. He was clearly no famous hunter, just another rookie with bright hopes and empty pockets. But if he returned holding a heavy purse, she stood to earn a tidy tip. And if the night ended with more than ale and coin exchanged, well, that was just an added bonus. Chapter 51. Bounty Classification. Damien paused before the flickering holoboard, its ever-changing portraits and data shimmering under the neon glow. A blonde, bunny-eared girl drifted up beside him, peering at the strange symbols scrolling across the display. "Excuse me, miss," Damien said, turning to her with a polite nod. "I don't recognize this dialect. Could you help me translate it?" She flashed him a wicked grin, her blue eyes dancing. "Sure," she replied, tucking a strand of platinum hair behind one ear. "And when I'm back on dry land, I'll buy you a drink." Damien smiled. "I'll hold you to that." He studied her for a moment, then offered his hand. "I'm Damien Cassidine." She slipped her slender, white-furred paw into his, her fingertips brushing lightly over his golden gauntlet. "Lacey," she said, her voice soft and clear. "A pleasure, Mr. Cassidine." When she released his hand, the faintest spark of amusement lit her eyes. Damien remained unruffled. With a curt nod, he turned back to the bounty board, already plotting his next move. Damien knew all too well that a woman like Lacey, who held court every night at the bounty bar, led a life that most would call chaotic. He wasn't prudish about sex, but he'd never let desire cloud his judgment, nor had he ever fallen for anyone on a whim. "Don't worry," he told her with a nod. "When you return with a full bounty, drinks are on me." Lacey withdrew her hand with a playful curl of her lips, her smile more intoxicating than ever. "In that case," Damien went on, "I'd be honored if you'd make the introductions to Mistress Lacey herself." The moment Lacey stepped back, Damien paused, surprised by his own boldness. Around them, the bar's regulars exchanged knowing looks. They'd seen Lacey perform this exact routine countless times. The gentle retreat of her hand, the coy invitation, the flush of excitement on a newcomer's face. As the Bounty Bar's hostess, she controlled the flow of fresh contracts and coached aspiring hunters on their first dangerous assignments. Many greenhorns had splurged to enjoy an evening in her company, only to regret it later, though, at the time, they'd been perfectly willing to pay the steep price. And woe to anyone foolish enough to cross her. Lacey had powerful allies watching her back. Now that Damien had taken the new bait, fleeting shadows of his past flickered before his eyes. He paused, reminded that in life you truly learn only by living through it. No one hands you the answers. "Before we introduce ourselves," Lacey said smoothly, watching the change in Damien's expression, "Mr. Cassadin, just how powerful are you, and which bounty tiers do you intend to tackle?" Damien hesitated for a heartbeat, then gave a faint, confident smile. Lacey saw she'd hooked him, so she dropped her flirtatious act and leaned in, genuinely curious. "I admit, I'm not well versed in bounty rankings. Would you mind explaining them to me?" A spark of interest lit Damien's eyes. "Of course. There are 3 standard bounty levels, aside from a handful of special cases. Tier 1 assignments pay out between 100,000 and 1,000 credits. It's usually short-range work, tracking down fugitives, standing guard, or cleaning up minor disasters," Lacey explained with a casual smile. "You don't even need your own ship. You can catch one of the interstellar shuttles via Xandar. It's perfect for newcomers. If you've got any marketable skill, you'll find opportunities. Plus, you'll rarely go it alone. You'll team up with veterans who can show you the ropes. Just watch out for scams. Not every recruiter is honest." She leaned back, still smiling. 100,000 yuan is a lot of money. You could blow 1,000 yuan on a single night with a couple of companions. Most people live on about 2,000 yuan a month, enough for food, drink, and a comfortable life. Damien nodded thoughtfully, eyes fixed on her as he absorbed every word. Damien settled into the cramped briefing room aboard Omega Station's lower decks. Around him, the air hummed with the low chatter of bounty hunters and mercenaries, toughened veterans who'd seen stars turn red from weapon fire. At the center, Lacey, the station's veteran mission coordinator, loomed over a holo projector. Opposite her stood Cassadin, one of the sector's most feared bounty hunters, arms crossed, eyeing Damien with mild curiosity. Lacey tapped a sequence into the holo projector. "Second-tier jobs pay between 1 and 5 million credits," she began. "At this level, the scope widens, and so does the danger. You might be ordered to hunt down high-value fugitives drifting between star systems, escort merchant liners through predator-infested warp routes, or neutralize creatures that have overrun remote outposts." Cassadin nodded. "Get ready for a long haul. These aren't quick hops from planet to planet. You'll be out in deep space for weeks at a stretch." He leaned in. "And remember, everyone else wants the same prize. First to file the claim gets the bounty. You'll need a fast, well-armed ship. No exceptions." Lacey gave him a wry smile. "We call this the 3-year curse. Either you go 3 years with no contracts, or 3 years straight without a break, if you survive." Her expression darkened. Colleagues turn on each other. Gun ports open without warning. It's not uncommon to return empty-handed, or not at all. She flicked the holo to the next tier. Tier 3 runs from 5 to 10 million credits. These missions target warlords who command private armies, genetically spliced monstrosities roaming uncharted sectors, or rogue AIs that can field fleets of combat drones. Very few hunters even bother applying, and those who do rarely come home unchanged. Damien leaned forward, heart pounding. The numbers alone made his pulse race, but the risks were even higher. Still, this was what he'd trained for. Dangers or no, he'd face them head-on. After all, in the void between stars, only the bold ever carved out a legend. Damien leaned forward as Lacey continued her overview. Usually it's planetary rulers or massive corporations that pool resources and post these joint bounties. The missions themselves tend to fall into a few categories: tracking down notorious, terrifying monsters, recovering rare artifacts from interstellar predator hordes, clearing out hazardous zones so they can be safely mined, or even hunting down ancient beasts thought long extinct. Rewards start at around 5 million credits, she added. But if you pull it off, you not only earn allies and build your reputation, you can also unlock extra bonuses and get tapped for future assignments. She paused, letting Damien absorb the information. Bear in mind, though, that level 3 bounties aren't solo jobs. You need a well-equipped team with the right gear, and substantial payouts beyond the baseline only show up on designated contracts. Those clients can't afford to see their people wiped out. Damien nodded. It wasn't beginner's luck that built a bounty hunter's career. It was preparation, teamwork, and knowing exactly what you were signing up for. Damien leaned back in his chair, absently tapping the datapad. Once you've operated beyond a certain sector, you'll find it's more efficient to invest your credits in armaments, outfit yourself, recruit reliable muscle, and settle most disputes on your own terms. Miss Lacey smiled, nodding. Exactly. So you're ready to move up. Tell me which tier you're interested in. I understand, Damien said, folding his hands. Then, Miss Lacey, walk me through the level 2 bounty assignments. At her prompt, he fell silent and listened carefully as Lacey outlined the tier system. On Blue Star, bounties exceeding 5 million credits are exceedingly rare, almost a legend among hunters. Damien didn't doubt his ability to tackle a level 3 target someday, but he still needed his own cosmic translator and a handful of specialized tools before venturing that far. There was gear to buy, alliances to forge, and intel networks to tap into. Mr. Cassadine, Lacey began, her tone more gentle now, I know you're ambitious. Hoo-woo, Eldiant want to pull in massive paydays. But you've only just entered this field. Jumping straight to level 2 might be premature. She leaned forward, resting an elbow on the table. Level 1 bounties aren't exactly child's play, but for someone with your skill and courage, plus a decent arsenal, they're entirely doable. And once you get comfortable, learn to charm or intimidate your way past complications, you can clear tens of thousands in no time. Damien studied her for a moment, weighing the advice. The promise of quick credits was tempting, but Lacey was right. Every seasoned hunter started somewhere. All right, he said at last, let's talk about the level 1 contracts. What's available right now? Damien didn't hesitate. He went straight for a level 2 contract the moment he surfaced. The risks at this tier were steep, casualty rates skyrocketed, and assignments often dragged on for weeks. Lacey, however, wasn't about to see her quarry die before she'd even completed a single job. Show me the details, Damien said. I'll explain how it works. When you get back, I'll buy you a drink, or two, Lacey replied, a small smile playing on her lips. He recognized the unspoken bargain immediately, and she fell silent. Lacey plucked a thin, transparent display out of the air, tapped a few times, then swiped across its surface. To Damien's surprise, the alien glyphs melted away, replaced by text in a language he could actually read. He scrolled through the available contracts. Every open mission carried a minimum bounty of 3 million credits. Anything less had already been taken. Each listing even showed who'd completed similar jobs before, and a single tap popped up the target's holo portrait. It was obvious that these interstellar bounty hunters worked in broad daylight, unlike Blue Star's shadow broker mercenaries. Earn enough reputation here, and the system would start assigning him jobs by name. But first, Damien would have to prove himself on this high-stakes mission. Chapter 52. The Land of Yellow Sand. Damien scanned the list of available assignments. He dismissed the bounty hunting contract outright. Though his ship could chase a target across interstellar space, he lacked the necessary interface to tap into the official bounty intelligence network. Without that connection, any pursuit would be blind, and searching for a single fugitive in the vastness of space was like looking for a needle in a haystack. He had no interest in escort missions either. Too many variables, too little payoff. Instead, his eyes settled on the disaster clearance assignments. The concept was simple. Travel to a troubled world, neutralize the threat, collect the reward, and move on. If the hazard turned out to be a living creature, there might even be valuable bioenergy or specimens to salvage afterward. It was a straightforward plan, far more appealing than babysitting a merchant convoy. One mission title jumped out at him, Sandstorm Predator of Morogi. This desert planet had been besieged by ferocious, burrowing monsters capable of whipping up massive sandstorms that devastated villages and trade routes alike. Damien leaned back, imagining the endless dunes and the howling wind. A single well-placed blast from his plasma rifle could carve open the creature's lair, and once it was down, he'd finish the job and collect every credit he'd earned. With a satisfied nod, he plotted a course for Morogi. Yellow sand and shifting dunes awaited him, and so did a hefty payday. This contract had been open for 11 years and 74 days. In that time, 687 hunters had attempted it. None had succeeded. Most died in the effort. The rest abandoned it long before. Yet Damien didn't hesitate. He tapped the glowing hollow board in front of him, and a translucent star chart sprang to life. The destination, a remote sector 30 light-years from Xandar. The bounty, 5 million credits, was to be paid on delivery by King Orb Mowgli of the planet Mowgli. Lacey rose from her stool, clearly about to warn him again, but Damien's calm, unflinching gaze stopped her. She'd already had a few glasses of ale and knew another lecture wouldn't change his mind, so she simply lifted her drink in a silent toast. "Good luck, Mr. Cassadine." Damien inclined his head once. "See you later, Miss Lacey." Then he turned and strode away, his coattails flicking behind him. As his silhouette vanished down the corridor, a patron at the bar chuckled. "Well, Lacey, seems your efforts were wasted." She scowled into her glass. "Don't start." Another voice piped up from the corner. "I'll bet 500 credits he won't make it back. He's a dead man out there." Lacey slammed her mug down so hard the woodwork shook. Who in their right mind would take that bet? "Why don't I bet that he dies, and you bet that he survives?" Who wouldn't be tempted by a 5 million credit payday, but you still have to be alive to collect? Damien shrugged, leaning back on his stool. "I'm new to this business. I haven't run into anything truly dangerous, until now. I thought I had a plan." "Plans change when you're facing those desert beasts. I left my right leg and my fighter buried under all that sand." He paused. "Those monsters were like a natural disaster with teeth. If one of us walks away with a live target, consider it a miracle." Veteran bounty hunters rarely finish a career with every limb intact. Prosthetics are as common as blasters, and most of them live by one rule: pour every credit you earn back into the next job, edge ever closer to that final score. A peaceful life? Long gone the moment you sign on. You burn brightly, you burn fast, and you make every last second count. Leaving the bounty bar, Damien stepped onto the landing pad. The neon haze of Xandar's spaceport faded behind him as he climbed into his ship. He punched in the coordinates from his mission dossier and engaged the drives. In an instant, he slipped out of the system and into the void. The hum of the engines a promise that he would not fail the bounty on his head. 30 light-years from home, most explorers would need a starfighter to hunt down space-time wormholes. For Damien, however, distance was nothing more than a single step. He gazed down at the starfield until an ochre-hued planet drifted into view, 1/3 of its surface swallowed by endless deserts. With barely a thought, the void before him rippled. A miniature black hole blinked into existence, and the next moment he was standing on scorching yellow dunes. Gravity here was twice that of Earth's, and the air shimmered as if it boiled in a giant cauldron. An unprotected traveler would soon succumb to dehydration and heat stroke, collapsing into a bleached skeleton. Even the finest fighter jet pilots would count themselves lucky to escape this desert alive if their ship went down. Damien tested the sand underfoot, a fine, powdery blanket that hid secrets far below. From his vantage, he could perceive the restless movements 300 meters beneath the surface. Vast hordes of crustacean-like creatures burrowed deep and waiting. Undeterred, he took another measured step into the furnace of this alien world. It was, without question, a monster's paradise, and the deeper you ventured, the more colossal its inhabitants became. 2 kilometers beneath the dunes, the queen of this yellow sand spread her pincers, a scorpion whose carapace measured 20 meters across, whose body alone stretched 50 meters, and whose lethal tail pushed her full length to 100 meters. Around her, legions of smaller scorpions, each over 10 meters long, tunneled relentlessly through the shifting sands, hunting whatever desert creatures they could find. Once they made a kill, they dragged their prey back up 1,000 meters to the queen's lair. According to every report, this subterranean monarch commands the very sands themselves. At will, she summons savage storms that sweep across the surface world, and when threatened she burrows ever deeper, using the raging desert winds as her shield. No wonder countless expeditions have ventured here in search of glory or riches, yet every one of them has failed. For ordinary travelers, this sun-scorched land is nothing short of hell. But for the Scorpion Queen and her brood, it is the perfect fortress. At 5 million credits, this assignment was hardly a windfall. Still, Damien knew better than to quibble, and besides, it was only his first mission. No one had deemed it designated, so nobody was going to chip in extra pay. The king and the planet's citizens had clearly underestimated the creature lurking beneath their dunes, but Damien's priority was simple: come back in one piece and start his record on the right foot. He didn't need extra funds to remind him of the risks. His fighter jet slipped from hyperspace like a dart, streaking toward the desert world below. From above, the shifting sands looked innocuous, but Damien's cockpit instruments were already screaming warnings. The readings were off the charts, a living mass of biosand lurking just beneath the surface. As he descended, the surface itself betrayed the monster's presence. Where the dunes should have been still, they began to ripple. Then 2 colossal eyes cracked open in the shifting sand, sending ripples across the desert floor. Damien's heart pounded. The beast's primal hunting instincts had locked onto him in an instant. Without warning, the desert erupted. Tons of yellow sand lifted and spun around the creature, carving out a vast, churning vortex. The quicksand acted like water, carrying the beast upward with terrifying speed. Dust and debris whipped around the cockpit as the whirlpool strained to drag the jet and its pilot into the abyss below. Damien gripped the controls, throttling up for the fight of his life. Damien launched himself skyward, crackling violet energy rippling across his form. Jagged spikes of that uncanny power jutted downward as he gathered focus. Then, with a single, resonant exhalation, he unleashed his void thrust. Hundreds of razor-sharp beams of purple light shot into the desert floor, burrowing meters deep before erupting in a thunderous explosion. The blast rattled the sands for 10 kilometers around, splitting the earth open and swallowing it in a chasm. Fine grains of quicksand poured in from every side, and at the bottom of the gaping pit, a colossal black shape stirred. Its mournful roar echoed against the endless dunes, carried on a rising tide of golden sand. The whirlwind of grit filled the sky, turning sun and horizon alike into a shifting monochrome. Hovering before this behemoth, its length easily measured in dozens of meters, Damien was enveloped in a shimmering shell of purple aura. Within a 1-meter radius, not a single grain of sand dared cross his ward. He studied the towering desert monster, its wail wavering on the wind, then let his right hand transform into a lethal scythe of living violet energy. In the blink of an eye, he struck. 16 precise slashes carved through the creature's massive flanks with surgical fury. Its cry cut off instantly, and in the still desert air, the giant's body fell away in neat, lifeless segments, fallen testament to Damien's unerring skill. A vast sea of purple blood coated the yellow desert sands in a thick, haunting violet layer. Chapter 53. Desert Disaster. The monster's severed head alone measured 5 meters from snout to crown, and it was perfectly intact. Damien wove his void energy around it, lifting the massive skull into the air. The dripping blood clots fell behind him, only to be caught and held aloft by the same invisible force. Aside from turning in the head for his official bounty, every drop of that gore represented pure evolution points. Consuming it all would yield a staggering boost, befitting so formidable a foe. "It's a pity you lacked the capacity for true wisdom," Damien murmured, eyes fixed on the hovering cranium 10 meters away. "Had you been intelligent enough, I could have offered you a chance to embrace the void." With a creature of reason, he only needed to outline the void's promises, demonstrate a fragment of his power, and cooperation followed. But a beast driven by instinct and a rudimentary mind allowed no such negotiation. Damien held no regrets. He had done everything he could, and now the desert lay silent once more. Damien couldn't convince the creature to embrace the void, but at least he knew it would yield a generous haul of evolution points. As for flavor, he didn't dare hope for a culinary masterpiece. He simply prayed it wouldn't be downright inedible. He slung the carcass over his shoulder and set off toward Mowgli City, some 600 kilometers to the north. From the sky, he passed town after ruined town, abandoned settlements slowly crumbling under relentless desert winds. Glass turned to sand, steel to brittle rust. Once thriving communities now lay silent, their towers and walls bleached by time and tempests. The desert had its own ecosystem, and for a lone sand monster at the bottom of that food chain, there was just enough prey to survive. But when its brood multiplied, the hunger would grow too, and the barren wasteland simply couldn't support them all. Sooner or later, they'd push beyond the dunes in search of richer hunts. It wasn't cruelty. It was the unyielding instinct of every living thing, driven to expand its territory whenever its offspring demanded more than home could provide. With that grim thought at the back of his mind, Damien pressed on toward Mowgli, hoping the city's kitchens could transform his peculiar spoil into something at least half palatable. Damien had never understood why anyone thought a wolf hunting sheep was cruel. Predators hunted prey. That was nature's law. But this wolf had been feasting on intelligent beings, and when the townsfolk learned of its atrocities, they panicked. In their fear, they'd issued a bounty, and after much deliberation, they'd decided to recruit him. He'd flown over 600 miles across scorching sands, guided only by rumors of the beast's last sightings. At dawn, he finally spotted the desert gate crossing, the nearest outpost to civilization. A cluster of adobe huts and guard towers rose from the dunes, their ramparts dusted in red. The people here were said to have skin like burnished copper, and by Damien's admittedly blunt standards, they weren't exactly handsome. Still, he'd come on business, and there was no time for aesthetic complaints. He dropped from the sky like a sandstorm, clutching the severed head of the monstrous wolf. Its jaws were lined with jagged teeth, its eyes still half open in a final, feral snarl. The outpost's sentries, humanoid figures taller than any man Damien had seen, stretched to nearly 8 feet. They froze in fractured salute, voices rising in frantic guttural speech that Damien couldn't decipher. One of them, a mountain of rippling muscle, stepped forward, brow furrowed. "My lord, what brings you here?" the guard stammered, though the words themselves meant nothing to Damien. With a shrug, Damien tossed the heavy trophy at their feet. The wolf's head struck the ground with a thunderous crack, flinging a cascade of sand and bone fragments across the courtyard. The guards recoiled in terror, scrambling back 10 paces as their wide eyes tracked the fallen beast's lifeless form. Damien brushed a wisp of hair from his forehead and rubbed at the dull ache at his temple. He offered them a cool, level stare. Mission accomplished. Now all that remained was to collect his reward and be on his way, before the desert sun convinced even the hardiest guard to melt into the sand. Damien studied the enormous severed head at his feet. He tapped it once, then pinched his thumb and forefinger together, the universal sign for money, hoping the villagers would understand. "A ching? Ah. Leo, is this?" he ventured, trying to bridge the language gap. The burly man before him froze, eyes widening at the grotesque skull, then shifted his gaze to Damien's odd clothing and the fact that he'd flown down from the sky. Swallowing hard, the man mimicked the pinched fingers gesture. "A ching isn't here," he said, voice apologetic. "But Ah Shui is in town. My lord, please wait." Without pausing for Damien's reply, he barked orders to his companions. They hurried off into the wind-whipped streets, intent on fetching the town's mayor. These villagers had endured the desert's calamity for years, yet few had ever seen the beast itself. Sandstorms always reduced it to a shifting blur. Rumor held that their mayor, said to be over 2 centuries old, might remember its true form. Damien watched them vanish into the swirling dust. If no one here could answer his questions, he resolved to move on, to a larger settlement where communication and, he hoped, real answers awaited. The cosmic translator is invisible on Blue Star, but across the universe, finding one shouldn't be difficult. On Mowgli Star, someone must always carry one. Otherwise, how could a bounty ever be paid? 10 minutes later, a barefoot old man came running up over the hot yellow dunes. His face was deeply lined, and his tangled hair and beard burned red in the sunlight. Yet he strode as if walking on cool marble. Mowgli natives often possess astonishing vitality, unaffected even by scorching sand. Breathing hard, the old man fell to one knee. "My lord," he said, voice trembling with respect. "I am Alex, mayor of this settlement. Did you really defeat the Desert Scourge?" Damien nodded. "Yes. Now take me to your king on Orb Mowgli. I expect the reward promised." "Our king dwells in Mowgli's capital, tens of thousands of miles from here," Elder Alex said with a polite bow. "At my age, I could never undertake such a journey, but I will gladly carry your message. I'll petition the court to send envoys to you." Alex's respect was evident. At his words, the gathered villagers exchanged glances of awe and gratitude. Damien, having just vanquished the beast that had terrorized their desert, felt their admiration keenly. "We'd be honored to host you with a feast," Alex continued. "You've saved us from a calamity none of us thought we could overcome." Damien smiled wryly. "I do have a hearty appetite, but I won't let you throw a banquet at your own expense. Here's my proposal. Help me turn this desert monster into our meal and reserve its head for me. I'll need it to claim the bounty." A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. "Of course," Alex said eagerly. "Our specialty is sandshell scorpion. We'll prepare the finest dishes for you." Damien nodded. He set the leftover slabs of meat neatly on the ground. "Very well. Let's begin." More than 30 burly men worked in unison, hauling massive slabs of scorpion meat toward a vast circular stone pit. Sandshell scorpions are legendary for withstanding extreme heat, but they harbor a single fatal weakness: water. Alive, they burrow deep into the dunes, impervious to moisture. Once dead, even the smallest droplet can shatter their brittle carapaces. Alex waved his hand to signal the cooks onward. "Warrior, I've already sent word ahead. We'll wait until you've finished your feast. The King's Guard's air squadrons will arrive soon. Only then will you be summoned to claim your reward." He leaned in toward Damien, catching his eye. Damien didn't know the identity of the man clad in golden armor, but any warrior capable of quelling a desert scow, RG, and soaring through the sky had to be extraordinary. In the presence of such power, there was no greater virtue than humility. "Understood," Damien said, inclining his head in respect. Chapter 54, God's Gift. Damien found a flat slab of sandstone and, with a subtle gesture, infused it with magic until it hovered in midair. He settled onto it, his void-woven robe shimmering in the sun's glare. The garment's arcane weave shielded him completely from the desert's scorching heat. All around him, the Mowgli tribespeople watched in stunned silence. Born of these yellow sands, they boasted extraordinary endurance, running for hours under the blistering sun without faltering, but even they had never witnessed a man flying without engines or wings. They'd seen alien starships descend in roaring bursts of light, piloted by beings wielding advanced technology, yet nothing had prepared them for this silent, hovering figure. Mayor Alex, resplendent in his embroidered leather vestments, stepped forward. His voice carried equal parts reverence and curiosity. "Warrior," he began, "if I may, what name shall we call you?" Damien regarded him with steady, unhurried calm. "My name is Kassadin," he replied. He let the word hang in the hot air. "I'm here on a simple contract, a job that's nearly done. I won't be lingering, so there's no need for titles." Alex bowed his head respectfully. Around them, the shifting dunes stirred as a warm breeze swept across the gathering, and the tribespeople exchanged awed glances. In a land of ancient endurance, none had ever expected a gift like this, one born not of engine or starship, but of pure, unbridled magic. "Please don't misunderstand me. I meant no disrespect," Alex said, hastily waving her hand. "But may I ask you something?" She bit her lip, glancing up at him. Damien Kassadin considered her for a moment, then inclined his head. "Go ahead." Alex drew in a steadying breath. "Mr. Kassadin, you fly as easily as a bird, and you alone can slay the desert scourges that terrorize our people. Are you a god?" A faint smile curved Damien's lips, but he gave no answer. His calm silence spoke volumes. Alex thought of the Mowgli clan's long struggle in these dunes, generation after generation locked in a deadly dance with the sand-shell scorpions. Some hunters returned laden with trophies, others never emerged from the sands. When they did not come back, the clan held silent funerals, weeping at the buried mounds before dragging themselves back into the desert. 20 years ago, a far worse horror befell them. A catastrophic sandstorm swallowed entire caravans, and the shifting ground opened up into quicksand traps that claimed dozens more. Their king spared no effort to end the nightmare. He offered every sacrifice, prayed at every altar. Yet the winds only howled louder, the sands only swallowed deeper. Ever since that day, the desert's fury has been woven into Mowgli legend and fear. And now, facing Damien Cassadin, who brushed off those same sands as if he owned them, Alex felt hope stir for the first time in decades. Whoever he was, divine or mortal, he held their fate in his hands. The desert disaster had shattered the fragile balance between the Mowgli tribe and the sandshell scorpions. No matter how devout the offerings, baskets of grain, fresh meats, fragrant herbs, piled high at the old temples, the gods remained silent. At last, the king had no choice but to turn to extraterrestrial allies. His senior nobles were outfitted with cosmic translators, and over the past few years, Alex had seen wonders and horrors beyond imagination. He'd watched alien warheads turn whole settlements into radioactive exclusion zones. He'd witnessed a 30-ship space fleet gliding over the dunes, its engines leaving suffocating heat and spilled power in its wake. Yet none of it could halt the desert disaster's advance. With no hope of destroying it, Alex and the Mowgli people became wanderers, always one step ahead of the dying sands, leading their flocks and families toward whatever territory remained safe. Then, as suddenly as it had erupted, the desert disaster died. Its end came not by wind or weapon, but by some unseen hand. For the one who brought that cataclysm to its knees, Alex could only utter one word: God. Damien's golden eyes narrowed as he looked at Alex, the weight of that single word hanging between them. "Then you must have your own world and a temple?" Alex asked, his voice trembling with excitement. Legend spoke of gods on every planet, and such beings were said to watch over their worlds. Yet in over 2 centuries of life, Alex had never laid eyes on a real deity. He'd begun to doubt they even existed. Now, standing before him, was living proof. Even if this being named Cassadin was a foreign god, mere contact with a divine entity was nothing short of a miracle. Damien regarded Alex calmly, allowing the young man's awe to grow before he answered. "I come from the void." Alex's pulse throbbed. The void, a realm whispered of, in fearful tones, beyond space and time. If Damien truly hailed from there, his power must rival that of any minor deity. In fact, Damien's current strength did place him on par with lesser gods. He could legitimately call himself a god. Yet, he confessed, he had neither temple to worship in, nor world to govern. Silence stretched between them as Alex struggled to comprehend this revelation, and the possibilities it might bring. "Great spirits, for generations our clan has called upon you, yet never once have we witnessed your blessing," the chieftain intoned, his voice echoing across the desert sands. "God of the void, we thank you for arriving to shield the Mowgli people from ruin. Our tribute, 5 million credits, will be delivered at once. Grant us but one favor. Allow us to erect a temple in your honor. Should disaster strike again, we vow to provide whatever you may require. We beseech you, continue to safeguard our tribe." As the chieftain fell silent, Damien sank to his knees beside him, head bowed in reverent silence. Though the Mowgli clan's technology did not rival the great empires of the cosmos, they still commanded starfighters capable of interstellar missions and sophisticated systems designed to counter natural and engineered threats. Yet for more than 20 years, they had battled an unforgiving desertification, an enemy no machine could fully overcome. Standing there, Damien understood the truth. This was no mere local deity, but an alien god, Cassadin, the Voidwalker, summoned by the king's lavish offerings. In this encounter, tribute was not mere superstition, but currency in a cosmic exchange, resources given in return for divine protection. And so, with steady faith, they placed their hopes in the power of this otherworldly patron. Damien's eyes snapped shut the moment Alex finished his offer. He sank into a trance-like state, extending his senses across every corner of Mowgli, a planet of yellow sands and windswept plains, jagged mountains and fathomless seas. He sought any lingering spark of true divinity, ruined shrines half buried in dunes, collapsed stone temples overgrown with coral beneath the waves, moss-choked sanctuaries nestled in dense forests. None of them had yielded even a single miracle for centuries. If a living god still reigned here, its house would not lie in dust. Back on the barren plain, Alex lay prostrate, heart pounding, staring up at Damien's inscrutable form. Every second stretched into an eternity as he waited, waiting for mercy, for power, for something in return for his devotion. Finally, Damien opened his eyes and spoke in a low, resonant voice. "If you build a temple in my name, I will grant you my blessing. Should a disaster ever strike that no mortal hand can overcome, you need only pray, and I will come." As he looked over the empty horizon, Damien felt a thrill. There were no living gods here, only the memory of faith long since turned to ruin. Soon, he vowed, that would change. His purpose in this universe was clear: to found the void divine faith, to gather souls into the void, and to draw fresh energy from their belief. And on Mowgli, the first whispers of his new cult would soon take root. If there were no other gods watching this world, Damien could safely recruit creatures into the void, letting them grow here until they were strong enough. Once his own power had grown, he could fully convert the Mowgli people into the void cult and draw them into the void's embrace. To found a church of the void and win true believers, he first needed to grant a few individuals a taste of its power. Damien lifted his right hand, channeling vibrant green life energy straight into Alex's body. Under the anxious eyes of the gathered onlookers, Alex's snowy white hair and beard flushed to a deep crimson in seconds, restoring the bright red hue the Mowgli once bore in youth. "Thank you, Kassadin, god of the void, for this gift," Alex whispered, feeling raw power surge through his veins. His gnarled hands smoothed and strengthened, sinew and skin knitting back to vigor. He stared at his rejuvenated arms, awe shining in his eyes. At that instant, a notification appeared before Damien's vision. Mowgli stars Alex Mowgli requests to believe in and comprehend the void. Do you accept him into the great void? Damien confirmed without hesitation. A swirl of purple energy enveloped Alex's form, lifting him gently off the ground as he was drawn into the void's waiting depths. The assembled members of the Mowgli clan stood frozen, their eyes wide with astonishment. Though Kassadin's low, otherworldly incantations were lost on them, the mayor's plea was unmistakable. They were standing before a god from the void. With his hands raised toward the sky, the mayor called out for divine favor, and to everyone's amazement, it came. Within moments, Damien's eyelids fluttered open. He took a shuddering breath, every inch of him trembling with the force of the void's power. "Thank you for this gift," he whispered, his voice thick with awe. "I vow to build a temple in your honor and to worship you until my dying breath." At that instant, Mowgli felt the full weight of the void god's presence. Overwhelmed, he sank to his knees, forehead touching the earth. In a solemn voice choked with reverence, he added, "May your will guide us always." The clan remained motionless, hearts pounding, as the void's blessing settled over them like a living thing, mysterious, infinite, and utterly transformative. Chapter 55. The Three Commandments. Because he had recruited Alex, Damien's reservoir of void energy swelled by 1,000 points. It wasn't a great leap, but with Lick steadily bringing more of his kin into the fold, the goal of 100 million void energy drew ever closer. Damien regarded Alex, kneeling, eyes alight with devotion, and spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from the void itself. "You have accepted my blessing and pledged yourself to the void," he declared. "In return, you must observe 3 sacred commandments. 1. You may consume anything that contains energy to evolve and increase your power, but you shall never devour a living being. 2. I will not forbid you from wielding your strength to settle conflicts, even if lives are lost. Yet under no circumstances shall you turn your hunger upon your own kind. 3. At all times, remain clear-headed and controlled. Do not let desire twist you into an irrational monster. Should you betray this rule, I will come for you myself to pass judgment." "The boundless void offers its grace to all who believe," Damien concluded, his gaze unwavering. Alex bowed deeply, voice steady and solemn. "O Lord Kassadin, god of the void, I swear to uphold these commandments for all my days." Damien stood before Lord Kassadin's true form and felt his chest tighten. The Lord appeared as a vast, swirling galaxy, immense, timeless, and utterly terrifying. Never had Damien sensed such raw power. The blessing Kassadin had just granted him was nothing short of miraculous. At over 200 years old, Damien knew he was already on borrowed time. Even in perfect health, a mortal lifespan rarely exceeded another 2 or 3 decades, and his body had long since begun to show the wear of centuries. Yet now, magically, his hair had turned half red, half white, and his reflection in the gleaming stones looked 30, maybe 40 years younger. Even more astounding, every meal he ate seemed to fill him with fresh strength. He felt reborn. Cassidon's deep voice rumbled through the silent shrine. "Excellent. I eagerly await your future deeds." He paused, as if pondering some unfathomable design, then continued, "So long as your people remain devout in their worship of the void, I will shower them with gifts and guide them into the great void itself." Damien exchanged a glance with Alex, his closest ally. "Yes," he replied, voice firm. Alex's face lit up, and he nodded vigorously. Around them, the others moved swiftly to prepare the offering. They unveiled an assortment of desert delicacies, smoked meats marinated in rare spices, vibrant fruits plucked from hidden oases, and fragrant stews simmered until rich and tender, and carefully set each dish on flat stones hewn from the canyon walls. One of the devotees stepped forward and announced softly, "Lord Cassidon, your meal is served." As the celestial being surveyed the feast, Damien suddenly felt a pang of hunger twist in his gut. His mind spun with possibilities. With this power, what heights could he and his people truly reach? Damien swallowed hard, quelling the roar of hunger threatening to overwhelm him, and spoke with careful respect. "Master Cassidon, please take your time. Allow me to withdraw first." He reached up, peeled off his mask, and the air around him shimmered with a faint, golden glow that obscured his features from prying eyes. Standing back, he bowed. Alex, witnessing this display of deference, hurriedly mirrored Damien's gesture. "Yes, master," he said, then hurried off. Damien knew his companion needed to find sustenance. Without it, Alex's hunger might drive him into irrational acts and incur divine retribution. Once the courtyard was empty, Damien turned back to the immense carcass before him, the desert disaster. Its segmented shell was tougher than any armor he'd seen, hewn by the crushing gravity of this world, which boasted nearly twice the pull of the blue star. Yet beneath that armor lay flesh surprisingly akin to pork, each sinewy strand tightly wound by the planet's relentless weight. Damien hefted his illy forged blade, sliced off a large chunk, and bit down. The crunch almost cracked his teeth, but the rich, savory flavor was worth it. Instantly, 50,000 evolution points flooded through him. In total, the desert disaster possessed 34 evolutionary tiers. To consume every segment would spark a full transformation in Damien, an outcome he both craved and feared. He toyed with the idea of devouring the creature's massive, multi-meter skull, but reminded himself of his duty. As king of the Mowgli tribe, he must present the head as proof of his victory, to reassure his people that their new sovereign was both powerful and just. Securing the trophy, Damien allowed himself a final appreciative bite, already feeling the power of the desert disaster coursing through him. Damien surveyed the half-built temple plaza below him, weighing his next move. To win the favor of this planet's king, he needed more than just victory. He needed a lasting monument. Better, he thought, to keep his opponent's head as proof of conquest than to haggle over terms. The universe was full of powerful beings. There was no reason to rush. Down in the town square, the people of Mowgli Star gaped in stunned silence at the aftermath of the desert calamity. In little more than 2 hours, 100-meter-wide swath of sand had vanished, swallowed whole by the insatiable maw of the void god. Shock registered on every face, but true terror did not take hold. This display of power was awe-inspiring in its severity. Inside his private quarters, Damien finished his meal. With the last bite, his evolution points surged past 2.17 million, yet he resisted the urge to evolve immediately. He would wait until this expedition was complete and he'd secured a proper sanctuary. Just then, a thunderous roar split the twilight air. 30 khaki-colored fighter jets sliced through the sky, flanking a colossal battleship that descended like an iron behemoth. With pinpoint accuracy, it hovered outside the town's defensive perimeter, its engines pulsing like a heartbeat. A moment later, the ship's hatch shot open. A colossal figure stepped out, bare-chested, skin the hue of smoldering embers, and standing nearly 2.8 meters tall. Every muscle in his body seemed coiled, as if the ground could shatter beneath his weight. At the sight of him, Alex, the town's provisional leader, dropped to one knee. Like a wave, the gesture swept through the assembled townsfolk, and each person knelt, heads bowed in reverence or fear. Silence fell, broken only by the distant hum of engines as Damien watched the red giant stride forward. The real trial, it seemed, was only just beginning. Damien watched in awe as the lone figure in crimson took flight. Both feet launched him more than 10 meters into the air, and he sailed across a 100-meter stretch of desert in a single bound. 10 such leaps later, the stranger stood a mere 100 meters from Damien. Clad in unfamiliar robes, Damien did not kneel, nor did he flinch as the newcomer's gaze flicked to the massive head of a sandshell scorpion, nearly 6 meters long, lurking 10 meters behind him. With a graceful step forward, the red-clad man announced himself. "I am Orb Mowgli, king of the Mowgli." "You must be the warrior who ended the desert's calamity," he added, voice calm yet resonant. Orb Mowgli's lips curved into a welcoming smile as he extended his hand. "And I am Kassadin of the Void." Damien drew himself up, meeting each introduction in turn. "You've come for the reward for quelling the desert disaster?" Orb Mowgli inclined his head and motioned toward Kassadin. "You've lifted from our clan a threat that has plagued us for over 20 years. Your reward will be no less than what you deserve." At his signal, Kassadin gave a single, sharp whistle, an order that stirred the sands around them and set the next stage of their meeting into motion. Several burly attendants heaved 5 massive crates off the space battleship and set them down on the platform. Orb Mowgli strode forward, face alight with enthusiasm. "Kassadin, he said, addressing Damien with a respectful nod. "Your power is the greatest we've ever encountered. We believe only you can end the desert catastrophe. Let us form a partnership, and should any other threats emerge, we'll be happy to compensate you handsomely for your aid." He paused, then added, "Would you be willing to exchange cosmic coordinates with me? It would simplify future communications." Damien studied the outstretched hand and smiled gently. He understood that recruiting an alien on the spot wasn't feasible, but forging a friendly bond and laying the groundwork for paid assignments was an excellent start. "I don't actually carry any cosmic signals," he admitted, "but I'll be glad to visit Mowgli Station again as a guest." Mowgli's smile wavered only momentarily. Damien's inability to trade in cosmic IDs, universal credits, or interstellar transponders meant the formal mission was still out of reach, but at least the invitation stood. "Very well. Next time you visit, you simply must come see our capital, Saren." Orb Mowgli masked his surprise at the absence of any cosmic signal in response. He'd already learned that Kassadin intended to leave as soon as he'd collected the payment. Detaining him would only be a courtesy. With a polite nod, Orb offered his agreement. "Certainly." Damien returned the gesture, clasping Orb's hand. Then, in a single bound, he covered hundreds of meters and materialized in front of the 5 sealed crates. He traced a finger along their surfaces, and with a soft incantation, vanished from sight. The assembled Mowgli delegates stared at the empty spot, stunned into silence. Orb Mowgli whirled to Alex. "Lix, you look younger than ever. And what about Kassadin? What occurred just now?" Alex's hair, now streaked half crimson and half silver-white, seemed to glow. His eyes flickered with otherworldly light as he met Orb's gaze. "When our king arrived, I forged a covenant of faith and blessing with Lord Kassadin, the god of the void. In return, I received his divine boon." Straightening, Alex began to relay every detail of his encounter with the void god. "Can an alien god truly inspire such faith that it grants blessings?" Governor Lix mused aloud. Orb Mowgli inclined his head. "You're our only believer in the void on all of Mowgli, Lix. I'm authorizing you to build him a temple, select the site, oversee the design, and judge its worth. I'll transfer the funds directly to you once I leave. Don't disappoint me." As Orb Mowgli turned to go, Damien's eyes stayed fixed on the exact spot where he had vanished. Miracles had been unseen here for generations, and now an otherworldly deity had arrived. If genuine blessings flowed from belief, this could elevate his entire family. Yet Damien was cautious. First, he would observe Alex. If in the coming 6 months, perhaps even a year, Alex's body remained stable, showing no unexpected surges of power or harmful side effects, Damien would have no hesitation in commissioning more sanctuaries for Kassadin, the god of the void. Chapter 56, Licensed Professional Bounty Hunter. After parting ways with Mowgli, Damien loaded 5 heavy crates into the void pouch at his command and materialized back in Xandar. His first orders of business were simple: secure funds, pick up essential equipment, open a bank account, and then swing by the bounty bar to celebrate with Lacey. Thanks to his void magic, hauling the cargo through the city gates was effortless. Once inside Xandar City, he asked a few locals for directions to the Universal Bank. By the time he found it, dusk was settling over the spires. He joined the interminable queue, filling out forms, submitting biometric scans, and answering string after string of security questions. Nearly 4 hours later, Damien finally emerged with his very own Universal Bank credit card in hand. Next, he turned to the bank's tech counter. A friendly Xandar Star bank attendant helped him select 2 universal translators and a pair of long-range communicators. Damien bit his lip at the surprisingly modest price, just over 3,000 credits for all 4 devices. Back aboard his ship, he tapped the wrist rest of his jacket. A translucent hollow panel flickered into view, displaying menus and protocols seamlessly translated into Blue Star Standard. With these new tools, language barriers would be a thing of the past. He could tap into interstellar data feeds, hail distant allies, or negotiate bounties across star systems in real time. Universe-grade tech, Damien thought, never ceased to amaze. He packed 1 translator and 1 communicator in his personal kit, setting the other pair aside to deliver to Tony. Stark might reverse engineer them, or at least draw fresh inspiration for new gadgets. Confident he'd laid the groundwork for his next move, Damien checked the time. The bounty bar was opening soon. He was overdue on those celebratory drinks with Lacey. Tonight, he'd finally toast to his official status, a bona fide, licensed professional bounty hunter. Damien ran through his options. Ideally, he'd lay hands on a starfighter and haul it straight back to Tony. Buying one outright would be a headache. He had no shady arms dealers on speed dial, so a better bet was to pick up a bounty that put him within reach of a ship. If the circumstances were right, slipping away with a fighter intact wouldn't be impossible. Once his paperwork was squared away, Damien slipped into the bounty bar and instantly felt the room go cold. Conversation sputtered to a stop. Every eye snapped to the man in purple and gold armor, his face hidden behind a golden mask. They all knew him as Cassidon. Just over an hour ago, he'd completed the dreaded Desert Disaster mission, an assignment no one had managed in a decade, and returned in record time. Sure, Mowgli was only 30 light-years away if you had your own fighter and a wormhole jump lined up. But no one expected him not only to get there, but to finish the job faster than anyone dared believe. Everyone in the room had heard rumors about the Desert Disaster mission's legendary difficulty, even those who'd never dared to accept it. After all, the so-called Desert Disaster ruled over the entire expanse of yellow sand. No armada of ships could reach it, and no bombardment of high-yield ordnance, however powerful, could penetrate the desert's endless depths. Without mapping every hidden cavern and dune, it was impossible to threaten this cunning, well-entrenched adversary. No one really understood how Cassidon had managed to pull it off. They only knew that his strategy and the force behind it was more terrifying than anything they'd ever seen. Damien strode past the clustered hunters who watched him warily, then slid onto the barstool directly in front of Lacey. He offered her a casual grin. "Lacey, I'll have a few glasses of your best wine, and pour yourself a couple too." He settled in, as though he owned the place. Lacey had been sure that Cassidon, an utter rookie in the bounty hunting world, would crash and burn under the mission's weight. Yet here they were, barely half a day later, and she'd just received a 5,000 yuan referral bonus for pointing him in the right direction. Orb Mowgli, the bounty's sponsor, had already wired the 5,000 yuan for the mission and covered the organization's fees. In this line of work, novices often make their name and earn their first real pay on a single assignment. To Lacey, even 1,000 yuan felt substantial. 5,000 seemed almost unreal. She stared at Cassidon's inscrutable golden mask. "You really completed that mission?" she asked, still incredulous. "Absolutely," he replied. Lacey shook her head. "Previously, I didn't have a cosmic translator, so I couldn't even understand the bounty details, let alone the regulations." Cassidon gave a brief bow of acknowledgement. "I'm grateful to you, Miss Lacey, for introducing me to this field." "Oh, you're the one who helped me," Lacey insisted. "That translator recommendation was mine." Cassidon's eyes gleamed behind the mask. In that case, may I invite you for a drink? I'd like to discuss the future and thank you properly. Damien caught the exchange and smiled. He stepped forward. If you don't mind, Miss Lacey, I'd like to join you both. I've just come into some new gear for space travel, and thanks to this mission, I won't have to hunt down a translator every time I'm in the field. Lacey's surprise softened into a genuine smile. It looks like we're overdue for a celebration then. Drinks are on me. Damien's meal of the desert disaster had earned him just enough evolution points for one more transformation. More importantly, he'd already planted a seed on Mowgli. In a little while, Alex would be able to recruit more of Mowgli's people to the void. But first, Damien still needed Lacey's help to tap into the Bounty Organization's network via the Cosmic Communicator. That was the only way he could fully integrate into the galaxy at large. Mr. Cassadine's invitation is an honor, Damien said, inclining his head with quiet respect. Lacey's eyes flickered in surprise, then she recovered with a slow, sultry smile. She let her gaze drift appreciatively over Damien before replying in a velvet-soft voice. I'm pleased you think so. Internally, she shrugged off any thought of trickery. He was clearly a powerhouse, capable of tackling a level 3 bounty without assistance. Hunters of his reputation never needed introductions or backers. If she wanted to work with him, the best approach was straightforward conversation, not deception. Damien watched Lacey from across the bar, reminding himself of one hard truth. Even though Xandar's laws forbade wanton violence, and even though Lacey had powerful backers, any hunter bold enough to accept a level 3 bounty was invariably ruthless. Cross one of those targets, and they'd have no hesitation in killing you on the spot. Cherry, Lacey called to the bartender, voice low and laced with amusement, pour us 2 glasses of your finest vintage. She let her gaze drift over to Damien. Mr. Cassadine invited me along for a few drinks tonight. With a slow, confident grace, she rose and glided across the room. Her long, pale legs sheathed in sheer stockings carried her straight to the stool beside Damien. She settled in, hips swaying, and offered him a smile edged with challenge. Mr. Cassadine, she purred, I need your help. Teach me how to operate the Cosmic Communicator. Damien lifted his right hand, tapped a discrete panel on the table, and a 3-dimensional interface unfolded in midair. Soft blue lines traced the contours of a star map and scrolling data fields. You want direct access to the Bounty Network? He asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes keen. Lacey inclined her head, the hologram's glow reflecting in her eyes. Exactly. Walk me through it. Damien nodded. All right, let's get you hooked in. And with that, he began to explain the system's layers, as the bar's ambient hum faded into the background and the holographic bounty ledger took center stage between them. Though bounty hunting isn't widespread across the galaxy, it remains a legitimate profession. You simply connect to the network and search for contracts. Some missions can cause unavoidable collateral damage, which is why certain planets refuse to host us. Beyond those restricted worlds, however, powers like the Xandarians, the Kree, and the Sovereigns don't interfere with our activities. Even if you earn a bad reputation on a few systems, it won't slow you down, though you might find a price on your own head. Lacey leaned forward, her long, pale fingers dancing over the holographic console as she guided Damien through the login sequence. He could feel the soft curve of her body nearly brushing his arm. All around them in the bar, other bounty hunters watched in silence. They'd fallen under Lacey's spell before, enamored by her flawless skin, the way she carried herself, and her uncanny knack for giving a man exactly what he wanted, both to see and to feel. They remembered their first encounter with her all too well. Despite later discovering they'd been swindled out of a considerable sum, their opinion of Lacey never wavered. Whenever the mood struck, they were more than willing to pay her again, eager to indulge their eyes, their bodies, and their hearts in the exquisite pleasure only she could provide. If you enjoyed this chapter, please show your support with a vote. Chapter 57, Information and Gratitude. Damien didn't object when Lacey took charge of his registration. He sat back and absorbed both the explicit regulations and the unwritten rules of bounty hunting as she guided him. Though he possessed considerable strength, he wasn't so powerful that he could ignore every protocol. He still needed to abide by the guild's guidelines. With Lacey's assistance, Damien set up an account on the official Bounty Hunter portal. He filled out his resume, uploaded an accurate description of his appearance, listed his completed contracts, and in an instant, his hunter rank jumped to level 2. Next, Lacey downloaded and helped him register for the specialized intelligence network known as Light and Shadow. This network lets you pull up detailed mission data so you can plan more thoroughly, Lacey explained. But if you want real-time updates or the freshest intel on any given contract, there's an additional fee. Damien nodded, already thinking through the missions he might pursue. With official registration complete and access to Light and Shadow secured, he was one step closer to carving out his reputation as a bounty hunter. Damien watched as Lacey finished tapping through the registration terminal. When she looked up, her expression was all business. The basic intel on the 9 standard missions is extremely reliable, she began. However, data on interstellar predators and bounty hunters isn't always 100% accurate. I can only share where I've seen them, their known abilities, and so on. She leaned back. Keep in mind, these hunters make plenty of enemies along the way. They rarely stay in one system long. Only the most formidable predators dare to remain on the same planet year-round without worrying about ambushes or retaliation. Damien nodded. That makes sense. And beyond the Dahl, the Kree, and the Sovereigns, are there any other factions I absolutely can't afford to offend? Lacey paused, reflecting for a moment. If you strip away those 3 powerful races, the only entities you really mustn't cross are the gods of Asgard and Olympus. Damien's eyebrows shot up. The idea of running afoul of deities sounded far more daunting than any bounty hunter, or even an entire sovereign fleet. But he kept his face neutral. Understood, he said. Thanks, Lacey. That's exactly the kind of heads-up I need. As a bounty hunter, whether you've heard their names before or not, you'll inevitably come across Odin and Zeus. Their power and influence are nothing short of divine, each ruling over multiple worlds. Fortunately, they rarely leave their own realms, so you're unlikely to cross paths with them in the wider universe. Don't lose any sleep over accidentally insulting a god. Then there are Gao Tianzun of Saga Star and the Collector from the Land of Nothingness. These 2 are brothers, ancient entities whose lifespans stretch back through countless ages. Over the millennia, they've amassed fortunes beyond imagination and built vast networks of underlings. If you're hunting bounties, you'll quickly discover that Gao Tianzun and the Collector are the galaxy's most prolific employers. Lacey folded her arms and gave Damien a pointed look. If you ever cross them, just say you offended every bounty hunter in the galaxy. She let that sink in. The moment a bounty goes up, dozens, if not hundreds of your fellow hunters will swarm in. You don't want that kind of attention. As for Gao Tianzun and the Collector, both live in near total seclusion. You're unlikely to run into either of them. Her expression grew serious. Your real worry should be Thanos. He's incredibly powerful and has been leaving chaos in his wake all over the universe. Lacey paused, leaning closer. Do your homework on him later, but whatever you learn, steer clear. Don't pick a fight you can't win. These were basic survival rules in deep space. Damien would come to understand them more deeply as he spent time among the stars. Lacey saw no reason to hide the facts. After all, Damien had already completed the legendary Desert Disaster mission, something that had baffled entire fleets at full strength. How he'd done it was a mystery, but Lacey knew one thing for certain: he was no ordinary operative. Still, facing any one of those 4 cosmic heavyweights solo was a different story. No matter how formidable Damien might be, 2 fists alone wouldn't be enough to take them all on. A man of Damien's caliber, someone who could take on a Tier 3 bounty assignment on a whim, had little to worry about, as long as he steered clear of the handful of people it would be foolish to cross. He could live as carelessly as he liked in this sector of the galaxy. When Damien recognized the names the bartender muttered under his breath, he felt a flicker of satisfaction. He glanced at the bottles lined up above the counter. One of them, the most expensive, went for 3,000 credits a glass. With a quiet gesture, he touched Lacey's arm. Instantly, a translucent hollow interface sprang to life. A few taps later, he'd entered a transfer of 100,000 credits and pressed OK. Miss Lacey, your information has been very useful, he said, his voice calm. "Let me start by buying you a drink." Lacey's dark eyes widened, but she managed a graceful nod. "I suspect our paths will cross again," she replied. Damien gave a courteous smile. "It's getting late, and I still need to find lodgings for the night. I should be going." He rose from his stool, offering a polite bow. Though Lacey had tried to charm him, hoping to play him for a mark, she knew better than to try anything once she realized how formidable he truly was. Instead, she'd aimed for a friendly rapport. She never expected his first move to be a transfer of 100,000 credits, more than 10 times her monthly salary of 8,000. As Damien slipped out the door, the gentle hum of the neon sign faded behind him, and Lacey stared at her console in stunned gratitude. She'd just met one of the universe's most dangerous men and walked away with a small fortune, all for a drink. If you want to boost your income, you'll have to work on commission and use your looks to entice and satisfy clients. On a good streak, you can pull in 100,000 credits in just 2 months. When luck isn't on your side, it might stretch to 3. Even without commissions, Damien's offer alone equals a full year's basic salary, truly generous by any standard. "Mr. Damien," Lacey said, rising to her feet and placing a hand over her heart. "I could talk with you all night." He inclined his head, a faint smile crossing his features. "Since it's your first time on Xandar, let me show you what this city has to offer." Though she'd never seen Damien's face and knew nothing of his origin, his commanding presence made it easy for Lacey to imagine he was every inch the handsome stranger she suspected him to be. "Thank you, Miss Lacey. You've already done more than enough." "This is simply me keeping my promise," Lacey replied with a faint smile. "I'm sure I'll be calling on you again," Damien said, inclining his head. "I look forward to our next meeting." "Likewise, Mr. Damien," he supplied. Then, with a subtle gesture, his body dissolved into a swirl of violet light and vanished through the bar's front door. Lacey stood motionless for a moment, staring at the empty spot where he'd stood. Over the years, she'd carved out a reputation in the bounty bar that balanced on her looks and her wits. She'd arrived as a waitstaff, pouring drinks and delivering plates, but ambition and the right connections had elevated her to the top of the local intelligence network. She wasn't as formidable as the major power brokers, but her beauty and the whispered promise of what she knew kept anyone with authority from daring to cross her. No supernatural powers, no flashy weapons, just flawless skin, a carefully studied array of seductive techniques, and an uncanny ability to suss out who needed what. Fresh bounty hunters were her specialty. As long as they hadn't developed unusual tastes, they were nearly impossible for her to resist. Time after time, she lured them in, extracted every scrap of intel, and watched them stagger away, none the wiser. Lacey smoothed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, her dark eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Damien was a promising new lead, and she intended to make sure he kept coming back. Damien never expected her to make the first move today. Even though her excuse was flimsy, he still found himself caught off guard. He could understand if Cassidin disliked her, but Mr. Cassidin had plainly said he was looking forward to seeing her again. It hardly sounded like dislike, and it left Lacey feeling uncomfortably conflicted. Chapter 58, Talents in the Bounty World. Damien's sudden departure drew every eye in the bounty bar. One of the hunters leaned toward Renali and whispered, "Renali, did you catch how he did that when he left? I didn't see anything." Renali shook his head. "I saw no trace. Nothing." Another hunter frowned. "So it wasn't just a blur of speed." "Most likely teleportation," Renali said, narrowing his eyes. A hush fell over the room as a third voice spoke up from the back. "I'll tell you something even stranger. I've seen my own future." Heads turned. "Your future?" someone echoed. "In that vision, I knew every move you'd make next," he continued, "but there was no sign of Cassidin, like he didn't even exist. All I saw was everyone else going about their business in plain sight. His actions weren't there." The bar fell silent. Over 30 bounty hunters froze, contemplating what this could mean. In this universe, incredible abilities aren't rare. Some hunters boast superhuman strength, others move faster than sound, and a few possess psychic gifts, glimpsing emotions, reading minds, or even foreseeing small fragments of the future. It's why so many of them ply their trade here. The hunt demands powers beyond those of ordinary people. Now, at the mention of Cassidin's absence in the seer's vision, every seasoned bounty hunter felt a chill. If Cassidin truly left no trace in someone's predicted future, then his talents, whatever they were, far surpassed even their wildest expectations. And in the ruthless world of bounties, that kind of edge can be deadly. Bounty hunters use their superhuman abilities to break free from the 9-to-5 grind, seizing complete control over their own schedules. Take Renoli, for example, nicknamed Supersonic because even the sharpest eyes can't track his speed. Officially, he's a level 2 bounty hunter, yet he's participated in and helped complete several level 3 missions alongside other elite operatives. Contrary to popular belief, level 3 bounties aren't strictly off-limits to level 2 hunters. When a team of highly skilled level 2s coordinates flawlessly, they can tackle assignments that would overwhelm solo trackers. In fact, there's no individual classified as a level 3 hunter anywhere in the galaxy. Instead, interstellar teams earn the right to fly a level 3 insignia only after collectively finishing enough Tier 3 tasks. Even then, each member's personal rank remains level 2. Only the team itself gets upgraded. And then there's the prophet, the soothsayer said to glimpse the future. He, too, carries the badge of a level 2 hunter, proving that in this line of work, rank often reflects cooperation more than raw power. Damien couldn't peer into anyone else's future, only his own, and even then, he saw events unfolding like a high-speed reel. Whenever a catastrophe or lethal threat was about to strike, his predictive range would spike, painting a broader, more detailed picture of what lay ahead. It was this extraordinary ability that had turned him into a legend in the bounty hunting world. A masterful combatant, an uncanny marksman, and the most sought-after partner on dangerous missions. Working alongside Damien meant slashing death rates and soaring success odds, so it was no surprise that he was constantly in demand. Now he sat among the members of the interstellar team, a third-tier bounty crew, listening to familiar voices register genuine astonishment. Almost everyone here had completed at least one contract with Damien backing them up. But today was different. For the first time, he admitted defeat. Someone had outstripped even his uncanny foresight. His speed, it's beyond anything I've ever seen, Renaud blurted, his voice tight. Even at supersonic pace, he simply couldn't track Cassidin's maneuvers. Damien exchanged looks with the others. None of them had ever heard of anyone moving at, or anywhere near, the speed of light. Yet before them was proof that limits could be shattered. In that charged silence, one fact became clearer than any future vis. Ion, the galaxy held deeper mysteries and deadlier foes than they'd ever imagined, and now their greatest advantage had been challenged. Teleportation is the only real way to explain Cassidin's astonishing transit. In a universe teeming with superpowered individuals, bounty hunters stand out even more. Any hunter of note boasts a unique skill or ability. Yet none had ever encountered only whispered rumors of a teleportation talent. They certainly hadn't forgotten Cassidin's very first assignment, which took him to Mowgli, some 30 light-years away. Time and again, they'd wondered how he could have reached that distant world so swiftly and completed the Desert Scourge contract. Now, with confirmation that Cassidin can teleport, it all falls into place. The thought that he could span 30 light-years in an instant unsettles every seasoned hunter. It calls to mind the gods of Asgard, who traverse the cosmos via the legendary Bifrost, an otherworldly rainbow bridge that lets them descend instantly upon any realm. Without such a bridge, even the mightiest would be unable to cover light-year distances at will. Yet Cassidin does it, as casually as stepping through a doorway. Damien watched the hollow feed in tense silence as news of a new bounty hunter spread through the galactic underworld. Cassidin, a man rumored to wield terrifying teleportation powers. Whispers claimed teleportation was only one facet of his arsenal. After all, the desert disaster mission demanded more than instant travel to pull off. The sudden appearance of a titan like Cassidin threatened to upend every alliance and rivalry in the bounty circuit. In their line of work, hunters often banded together for dangerous assignments, forming loose teams built on mutual trust and shared risk. But when one of their own amassed a sky-high bounty and the reputation to match, those comfortable partnerships could snap overnight. Allies turned into competitors the moment the reward on someone's head became too tempting to ignore. Damien knew this all too well. A hefty bounty might signal success, and also mark you for a galaxy's worth of hunters eager for your downfall. Still, the universe was vast, and time spent on any single planet was limited. Even a powerhouse like Cassidon couldn't chase you across every star system forever. That slim margin of freedom was all Damien needed to stay one step ahead. Cassidon, rumored to teleport across light years, had just appeared and informed the prophet that this event lay beyond the reach of his visions. He was undeniably powerful. If Cassidon accepted the bounty on their heads, there would be nowhere in the universe to hide. As soon as he took the contract and gathered the latest intel, he could materialize on any world, leaving them no time to flee in their starfighters. From that moment on, they had to guard against any action that might inflate the reward on their heads. "I've checked the logs. He only arrived on Xandar today," an analyst reported. "And there's no record of him boarding a fighter. His teleportation has to be real." "I still can't account for his other abilities," another voice added. "Give me a little more time. I'll continue cross-referencing every source." Damien watched them spring into action. If anyone could uncover a weakness in Cassidon's arsenal, it would have to be now. "Those cases will take time to investigate," Elias said, leaning back on his stool. "But judging from his very first assignment when he joined the guild, he only ever takes on big contracts." A murmur of agreement rippled through the other bounty hunters clustered around the bar. "The highest bounty any of us has right now is Damien's, 1.5 million, Lena pointed out. Another hunter shook his head. Even 1.5 million isn't exactly pocket change, but among second-tier hunters, it's still a small job. If we want a shot at his contract, it'd make more sense to team up with him and tackle an even bigger bounty. That way we all walk away with more coin." A younger recruit piped up, "What about those first-tier hunters? Could any of them steal Damien's mark?" The room burst into laughter. "First tier versus second tier," Elias scoffed. "They're not even on the same playing field. No one of that rank poses any real threat to Damien." As the conversation petered out, glasses clinked, and the hunters settled back into their chairs. For now, their focus was clear. Find a way to ride Damien's coattails to more lucrative contracts and richer rewards. Chapter 59. Checking in at the Celebrity Hotel. Thanks to the Cosmic Translator, Damien no longer had any communication barriers. Leaving the bounty hunter bar behind, he asked a passing pilot for directions to the most famous hotel on Xandar, the Celebrity. As he approached the towering structure, easily 70 stories tall, its gleaming facade reflected the neon glow of the city below. Stepping into the grand lobby, Damien paused to take it in. Plush velvet settees dotted the room, and clusters of exotically dressed guests laughed over cocktails. The air was alive with soft music and hushed conversations. Dozens of women, hostesses and socialites, stood about, their eyes flicking toward Damien the instant he entered. His dark leather jacket and the faint aura of authority the Cosmic Translator projected drew their attention like moths to a flame. Before Damien could move further, a young woman with a poised, elegant air swept up to him. Her uniform, a sleek, midnight blue suit, was tailored to perfection. She offered a warm, professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Celebrity Hotel. May I assist you?" Damien returned her smile, shifting the heavy translator device at his hip. "Yes, thank you. I'd like to check in." The receptionist's smile widened. "Certainly. Do you have a reservation?" "No," Damien replied. "I'm checking in without a prior reservation." She keyed his arrival into the system, fingers flying over a holo display. "Very well. We have several suites available, standard, deluxe, and our premium penthouse suite. Which would you prefer?" Damien considered the options, his mind already racing ahead to the mission that awaited him. "Surprise me," he said at last. "I'll take whatever you think best suits a long stay." The receptionist nodded and tapped the final command. "Excellent choice, sir. Your suite is on the 52nd floor. Please follow me to security so we can register your identification. Welcome to the Celebrity Hotel, Damien." As she led him toward the elevator banks, Damien steeled himself for the luxury and the intrigue waiting just beyond those polished doors. Damien stepped up to the front desk of the Xandar Star Hotel, smooth leather briefcase in hand. The lobby's high ceilings and glittering chandelier gave it the air of a five-star sanctuary, but when he offered his ID, The young receptionist shook her head apologetically. Sir, I'm afraid our policy requires a reservation before check-in. Without one, you won't be able to move in. Damien raised an eyebrow. Is there really no way to check in on the spot? The receptionist pulled her lips into a polite smile. If you don't have an advance booking, we require a one-time payment of $300,000 for a full month's stay. She leaned forward in a lower, confidential tone. I know that sounds steep. Most of our guests book only the days they need, just a few nights, and pay per diem. It's much more economical unless you plan to be in Xandar for weeks on end. Damien frowned. The price tag was eye-watering even for him. He gave a small nod. I appreciate the suggestion, but I'll stay for a month. Her eyes widened with surprise. Then she dipped into a respectful bow. Very well, sir. If you'll fill out this registration form, we'll have your suite ready right away. As Damien took the paperwork, the receptionist typed swiftly at her terminal. The chandelier overhead cast prismatic reflections across the marble floor, and for a moment he allowed himself to imagine the luxury waiting behind the ornate doors. A month in Xandar Star would certainly send a message. He just hoped it would be worth the cost. Damien followed the receptionist through the hotel's opulent lobby, its marble floors gleaming beneath crystal chandeliers. She led him to the front desk and tapped a sleek touchscreen. A projection floated into view. Sir, please complete your registration and payment here, she said, stepping aside. Damien typed in his details, handed over his card, and within moments the transaction was approved. The receptionist smiled. Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Your room is 7777. If you'll come this way, I'll show you to it. As they walked toward the elevator, she offered a polite bow. My name is Sonia. I apologize if I seemed brusque earlier. Damien inclined his head. No offense taken. Sonia gestured toward the gleaming hallway. Welcome to the Celebrity Hotel. We offer an all-inclusive meal plan. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are all provided in our grand dining hall. Damien nodded, curiosity flickering in his eyes as the elevator doors slid open. He stepped inside, ready to see the room that would be his for the foreseeable future. Sonia led Damien onto the suspended staircase and punched in the access code for the 77th floor. As the doors slid open, she smiled and began her introduction. Here at the Astra Sovereign, our menu changes every day, and we even offer special afternoon snacks. Once a month, we host a grand dance, an excellent chance to meet someone you're attracted to or simply make new friends with shared interests. She glanced at him. Would you prefer to dine in your suite or down in the food court? Damien looked around the gleaming lobby, recalling the glowing reviews he'd overheard. With his usual diet, he'd easily spend over 300,000 yuan in a single month just on meals. And since he was still unfamiliar with Xandar's culinary scene, hunting down reliable restaurants would be a real hassle. Here, 3 meals a day, all-inclusive, with fresh dishes every evening, it was tempting beyond measure. I'll eat in my room, he replied without hesitation. Then, on an impulse, he added, and please arrange dinner for 200 guests. Send it up here. Sonia paused, brow lifting in surprise, before smoothly tapping in his request. The seamless service of the Astra Sovereign lived up to its reputation, and Damien was about to find out just how far all-inclusive could go. Sonia pressed a hand to her temple. She'd volunteered to handle tonight's reception, and now she was getting a headache, but having accepted the assignment, she couldn't back out. Sir, please note, she began, forcing a polite smile. If you order too much food and fail to finish it more than 3 times, it's a violation of hotel policy and will have to apply extra charges. I understand, the guest replied smoothly. If there's any penalty, I'll of course cover it. Sonia bit her lip. In this hotel, any unpaid fines would come out of her salary, a risk she couldn't afford. But his calm assurance was real. And actually, he continued, leaning back in his chair, I'd like you to arrange all my meals not only for tonight, but for the next month as well. Send me the menus and make sure everything's fresh and well prepared. Damien glanced at Sonia's relieved expression and added, knowing you're handling it puts my mind at ease. Sonia blinked at the ease in his voice. He always managed to reassure her. Now that she had his clear agreement, she squared her shoulders and pulled out her notepad. Very good, Mr. Cassidy. I'll have the proposals to you shortly. Damien stepped onto the hanging ladder and rode it up to the 77th floor, where a glass-encased sky villa hovered above the clouds. As the doors slid open, Sonia greeted him with a polite nod. "Welcome to your temporary residence, Mr. Cassadine," she said. "You'll have exclusive control of this villa for the next month. Before you settle in, though, there are a couple of rules you must follow. 1. You may not sublet the villa or charge others for its use. If the hotel discovers a violation, your entire month's fee will be forfeited, and you'll be asked to leave immediately. 2. Any damage to the villa or its furnishings is your responsibility. You'll need to cover repair or replacement costs. Other than that," Sonia continued, "you're free to invite anyone you wish. If you need anything at all, just ask the villa's AI to contact me directly. Day or night, I'll respond as quickly as possible." Damien nodded. "Understood. One more thing. Could you have a meal prepared for me?" "Certainly, sir," Sonia replied with a small bow. "Your order will be up shortly." With that, she stepped back into the service corridor and left Damien alone in his new sky-high home. Damien stepped forward and took in his surroundings. From 77 floors up, the breeze might have been fierce, but here it was nothing more than a gentle, refreshing wind. The sky villa around him was the pinnacle of modern luxury. Smart furnishings that adjusted to his every command, an indoor swimming pool with panoramic city views, a fully stocked wine bar, exquisite artwork lining the walls, plush designer furniture, and state-of-the-art entertainment systems. Ahead, a glass-clear crystal bridge spanned the open air, leading to the private sky garden. All he had to do was walk across, and he'd find himself among lush greenery perfectly arranged for lounging. From a wrought iron bench beneath softly glowing lanterns, he could stare up at the stars, or glance down at the glittering metropolis spread out below. Damien smiled at the thought. Any evening spent here, especially with the right companion, would be impossible to forget. Chapter 60. Strength Determines Action. Damien stepped off the sky bridge and into a radiant garden, alive with softly glowing lanterns. Under the night sky, the blossoms seemed almost ethereal, their fragrance drifting through the air and soothing every sense. He walked to the edge of the marble path and paused, taking in the tapestry of colors woven from thousands of lights stretching into the distance. There was no question that Xandar's technology far surpassed Earth's. Blue Star didn't even field space fighters, let alone battleships, whereas Xandar's vessels patrolled the cosmos. Still, day-to-day life here felt surprisingly like New York. Citizens hurried along busy streets, vendors hawked their wares, lovers strolled hand in hand. The only real difference was the Nova Corps, a highly organized security force whose presence ensured that crime on Xandar was virtually non-existent. Damien knew the Corps enjoyed physical advantages over ordinary people, but they weren't in the same league as the legendary Mowgli warriors he'd encountered. The Nova Troopers possessed more stamina and strength than most, yet their powers remained firmly human. In this glittering world of advanced technology and interstellar travel, true superhuman might still belonged to Xandar's greatest heroes. Damien found that the Xandarians wearing Nova armor possessed strength far beyond that of ordinary people. It was thanks to this advanced star-forged suit that he was met with respect and even salutes wherever he went. In contrast, the ground troops in standard military fatigues offered only a casual nod. When Damien first arrived, the gate guards patrolling the city entrance wore nothing more than those plain uniforms, proof that even on a world united under a single banner, class distinctions still held sway. But Damien saw opportunity in that very hierarchy. He had no designs on conquering Xandar or proclaiming himself its ruler. His goal was far simpler: to draw as many Xandarians as possible into the ranks of the Void. To lead, however, he first needed a name. Once his reputation was established, a few well-placed rumors would send curious souls flocking to his side. Back on Blue Star, he'd constantly looked over his shoulder, terrified of attracting the attention of the Ancient One or Odin and of the endless troubles that would follow. Out here in the wider universe, though, those worries no longer plagued him. Damien hovered in the void, watching Xandar's proud Nova Corps parade their colors across the stars. Even their fearsome reputation, respected and feared by countless planets and races, posed no real threat to him. He thought of those who eagerly sought the power of the void. Would their allegiance tip the balance on Xandar, upend its rigid class system, or even spark a war? Of course, such upheaval was inevitable, but it wasn't his concern. He wouldn't meddle in the politics of weak worlds, nor would he play guardian to anyone. Damien understood only too well that power determines position. He wasn't yet strong enough to dictate order across the cosmos. Still, he had no regret about imposing self-restraint. Better to return to Blue Star under voluntary limits than to wander the universe bound by others' rules. His purpose was clear: use the vast, limitless reaches of space to accelerate his own evolution, so that one day nothing, not even the most ancient law or the strongest foe, could hold him back. To Damien, freedom was more than a word. It meant the right to choose, to refuse, and to stand unhindered by any force. And as he drifted among the galaxies, he resolved to spread the will of the void wherever he went. Any intelligent being who did not actively oppose him would be offered the chance to join. After all, power shared was power multiplied, and in the endless night of space, the void's influence would only grow. Damien leaned against the railing of the villa's skybridge, watching Xandar's vast skyline unfold beneath him. Countless races, humanoid, insectoid, crystalline, moved like currents in a living river, each hurrying about their day. A smile tugged at his lips. The void's influence might reshape these worlds someday, but that was a concern for another time. A soft rumble behind him signaled Sonia's arrival. Pushing a polished silver cart piled high with steaming dishes, she glided into the hanging garden courtyard. "Mr. Cassadine," she announced, neatly arranging platters across the marble table. "I've selected a variety of flavors for you, enough for 50 guests to sample. Please try these first. Once you've made your choice, I'll send out for more." Damien strode across the skybridge and took his place at the head of the table. He leaned forward, inhaling the aroma of spiced meats, exotic fruits, and freshly baked breads. "You've outdone yourself, Sonia," he said, eyes bright with appreciation. Sonia offered a professional smile as she served the first course. "I'm glad it meets your expectations, sir. After all you've accomplished, I wouldn't dare settle for anything less." Damien caught a flicker of something in her eyes, a hint of pride, perhaps, or relief. He nodded and lifted his fork. "Then let's begin." Damien stepped up to the sleek marble counter in the hotel's grand lobby. The concierge Sonia slid a polished brass card toward him. "I've been working here since I was 14, she said, her fingers tracing the card's edges. "That makes it 10 years on the job." Damien watched her with mild interest. "I'm curious," he said, leaning forward. "Have you ever met anyone who left as strong an impression as I have?" Sonia paused, then offered him a polite, knowing smile. "In 10 years I've met countless guests, Mr. Cassadine," she replied, "but very few carry the kind of aura you do. Then again, many of our clients come from the Nova Corps, elite operatives all boasting exceptional powers. In that context, strength isn't exactly rare." He nodded thoughtfully. She tapped a few commands into the panel at her side. 10,000 yuan a night, Sonia continued, is beyond the reach of ordinary people. Those who pay it either have top-tier social status, renowned moguls, nobles, or high-ranking officials, or they're independent heavyweights, the galaxy's best bounty hunters, mercenaries, or superhumans looking to make a name for themselves. "Are you saying," Damien asked, curiosity sharpening his tone, "that the monthly ball here draws those kinds of people?" "Exactly," Sonia said, her smile widening. "Once every month, we host a gala. The guest list reads like a who's who of the galaxy's most influential and most formidable. If you plan to attend." Damien cut in, already deciding. "Then I'll be there." Damien arrived unannounced, and Sonia greeted him with a cool professionalism as she laid out an array of dishes before them. Once the plates were in place, she uncorked a bottle of vintage wine and poured him a glass. Then, leaning forward, she began her explanation. "Mr. Cassadine," she said with a slight bow of her head, "you checked in without an appointment, so you may not be familiar with our celebrity hotel's most exclusive event. Here, we don't simply offer a place to relax. We provide an opportunity to rub elbows with the world's elite." She paused to let that sink in before continuing. "For a 1-month flat fee, you become eligible to attend our signature masked ball, held halfway through your stay. The evening operates exactly like a masquerade. Every guest borrows elaborate props and conceals their identity behind a mask. You may only learn who you're speaking with once you've engaged in a meaningful conversation. If you prefer, I can send you our full rulebook later, but that's the gist of it. Sonia arranged the final dish on the table, then held up her wine glass. To gain entry, the ticket costs 300,000 yuan. If you'd like to attend, just say the word, and I'll secure your place. At her words, the delicate golden mask that had been shielding Damien's face dissolved in an instant, leaving his features bathed in a soft amber glow. He set his wine down and regarded her coolly. "I understand, D," he said in a measured tone. Then, without another word, he picked up his chopsticks and began to eat. Sonia wasn't surprised that Damien possessed extraordinary powers. What truly unnerved her, though, was that his face remained hidden beneath the mask. She couldn't make out a single feature, and the mystery sent a chill down her spine.